Good evening. While we're waiting for the coming live stream of the Neuralink event that's supposed to be, according to the Neuralink Twitter account, at 8 p.m. Pacific time tonight, which will be 11 p.m. Eastern time tonight. And the details, we don't have them yet, but they're supposed to be revealed shortly before events start at 8 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, July 16th, which is tonight. I thought to come a little earlier, and I will be live streaming it whenever I have more details about it. I'll be checking on their webpage with respect to the links that are going to be available for the live stream, and maybe we can watch this together. But I thought to come a little earlier to go through some of the details about Neuralink, what Neuralink is, what to expect, and even hear Elon Musk himself talk about it from the clip of his appearance on Joe Rogan podcast. So 8 p.m. Pacific time. Right now it's 7:33 Pacific time. We are less than half an hour away from this amazingly important and historic, I have to say, reveal by perhaps one of the most important companies in definitely our time, but we can't even consider that to be one of the most important developments and companies in the history of humanity. Now, I don't know if this is by accident. It's too good to be considered as an accident. Hello, Vlad the Impaler. Good to have you here. Oleon 051 saying starts at 10 p.m. here. I'm getting no sleep. I got to tell you that it will pass my bedtime as well. But this is such a historic kind of an event. This is such an historic kind of a development. And as I was saying, I don't know if this is by accident or it was intentional. It's too good to consider it as an accident. Today is also the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 moon mission. So perhaps this was planned and perhaps this is intentional, considering the impact that landing on the moon has had for United States and really human civilization. This is something, if not more important at this point, is carrying the same amount of weight and same amount of importance. Now, the conventional wisdom is that the 50 years after Apollo 11, a Mars landing is the next giant leap, according to the NASA chief. But I would make the argument that this is actually the biggest leap and more, as it seems to be, according to the news, that Neuralink is going to actually make an announcement, and we're still a couple of years away from going to the Mars. What is going to be announced today, depending on the details, but there must be something interesting for Neuralink and for Elon Musk to bother having an event, having a live stream, having a press conference, or whatever and however they're going to conduct this. This is going to be extremely important, not only for United States, not only for the West, but potentially for human history, and I'm going to talk a little about that. We are about 25 minutes away from the time that this live stream is supposed to happen. As I said, they said that they have announced on the Neuralink Twitter that the details of this live stream will be announced shortly before the event start. I will continue refreshing their website to see if there is something new, and we haven't got any new details as of yet. It's great to have all of you guys here. Rob Robertson saying, let's assimilate. I'm on board. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to be able to merge with the machines. Oh, wow. I did not know that. Rob Robertson saying it's also the anniversary of the first nuclear test Trinity. This is amazing. And I have to say that in addition to everything being aligned, there's also a full moon here in South Florida. It will be very, very interesting to see if there is any kind of an alignment overall. It's a very historic kind of a night. Tropical Coder, welcome to you, and Robert Robertson, also Rob Robertson, welcome to you as well. Tropical Coder is saying, I'm very skeptical, although we can obtain much information from the brain. I can't imagine they are sending useful data directly to the brain. This is a whole other kettle of fish. We already have high bandwidth interface with our brain, our eyes, ears, nose, and all the other senses. These are all excellent input devices. Does it make sense to bypass them and go directly to the brain itself? Bradley Bozel, welcome to you as well, saying the website looks like bare bones HTML. It would be nice for them to have a YouTube stream as well. It certainly will be nice if they have a YouTube stream as well. And I will definitely share whatever kind of link that will be shared by Neuralink the moment that I get it. It's 10:37 p.m., which would be 7:37 p.m. Pacific time. And I will go and check their website every couple of minutes to make sure that we are not missing any kind of information. Neuralink, Elon Musk could be about to announce he's found a way to connect brains to computers. However, one of the most interesting posts that I found is by MIT Technology Review saying that Elon Musk brain interference company is promising big news. Hear it, what it could be, and they're predicting that Neuralink, which develops brain-machine interface, is recording from the neurons of monkeys as a stepping stone toward humans. If that is the case, that is a huge deal, and it's going to be incredibly controversial in many different levels. But let's see if that's actually going to be the case. MIT continues saying Neuralink, the secretive company bankrolled by Elon Musk to develop brain-computer interfaces, will provide its first public update later today in an event stream over the internet. This could be the big reveal of what the mysterious company has been up to since Musk announced it 2 years ago. Although everything about Neuralink is top secret, here at MIT Technology Review, we couldn't resist guessing at what the company will show to the world. According to Musk, also the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, and I want to make a connection between SpaceX and Starlink and Neuralink as well. The combination is kind of mind-blowing if there can be any kind of a real connection be made about all these companies and all these products with Elon Musk behind them. According to Musk, human minds need to plug into the internet so that our species can keep up with artificial intelligence. That's a futuristic scenario the billionaire laid out in April 2017 via a marathon post on the website Wait, but why? So the argument is, based on the speculation from outside experts, former insiders, and the past work of scientists Neuralink has hired, the company may be using what's called a neural sewing machine to inject flexible wire electrodes into a monkey's brain and then record from a very large number of neurons at once. That could be a big part of the reveal. Neuralink may also talk up new computer chipsets that can simplify the flood of information crackling out of the brain or send the data off the skull wirelessly, which would do away with clumsy cables. It's obvious that the overworked and brilliant Musk, who is not a biologist, is keen to make fast progress. Hansen said Neuralink's president, Max Hudak, want to get a huge number of measurements from human brains. That's cool, but it's not necessarily what you would do to treat a disease. Max and Elon were eager to go quickly to humans. The general consensus is that this is risky, he said. If you want to augment a human, you need to do a lot of basic work first, and obviously a lot of questions will be raised, a lot of concerns will be raised. I talked about this yesterday in a segment where I covered the Neuralink update in the news, talking about some of the elements and some of the areas that Neuralink has to address, whether tonight or at some point, are high bandwidth connection, non-invasive procedure, and these are also considered some of the challenges that Neuralink is facing, low latency, wireless connection. Hence, Neuralink's goal is to create a system that surpasses these roadblocks and achieve dependable human-computer communication. Let me just read some of your messages. I'm happy to see that you guys, 14 people are watching now. I appreciate it, and I will keep you updated on the latest updates from the Neuralink website. Nothing as of yet on the Neuralink website. Let's see what's happening under Twitter, if there is any kind of an update. We are about 19 minutes away from the time that they announced that 8 p.m. Pacific time. We're at 7:42, so 18 minutes. So while we're waiting, I thought maybe it would also be a good idea. Yeah, that's a good point. I thought it would be a good idea to revisit Elon Musk segment on Joe Rogan when he talked about the rationale and the idea behind Neuralink. So let's watch that, and then we'll continue from there.
It's likely that we will merge somehow or another with this sort of technology, and it'll augment what we are now, or do you think it will replace us?
Well, that's the scenario. The merge scenario with AI is the one that seems like probably the best. Like
for us.
Yes. Like if you can't beat it, join it. That's
yeah.
You know. So from a long-term existential standpoint, that's like the purpose of Neuralink, is to create a high bandwidth interface to the brain such that we can be symbiotic with AI. Because we have a bandwidth problem. You just can't communicate through your fingers. It's too slow.
And where's Neuralink at right now?
I think we'll have something interesting to announce in a few months. That's at least an order of magnitude better than anything else. Probably, I think better than probably anyone thinks is possible.
How much can you talk about that right now?
I don't want to jump the gun on that.
But what's like the ultimate, what's the idea behind it? Like, what are you trying to accomplish with it? Like, what would you like, best case scenario?
I think best case scenario, we effectively merge with AI, where AI serves as a tertiary cognition layer, where we've got the limbic system, kind of the primitive brain essentially. You've got the cortex. So you're currently in a symbiotic relationship. Your cortex and limbic system are in a symbiotic relationship. And generally people like their cortex and they like their limbic system. I haven't met anyone who wants to delete their limbic system or delete their cortex. Everybody seems to like both. And the cortex is mostly in service to the limbic system. People may think that the thinking part of themselves is in charge, but it's mostly their limbic system that's in charge. And the cortex is trying to make the limbic system happy. That's what most of that computing power is oriented towards. How can I make the limbic system happy? That's what it's trying to do. Now, if we do have a third layer, which is the AI extension of yourself, that is also symbiotic. And there's enough bandwidth between the cortex and the AI extension of yourself such that the AI doesn't de facto separate, then that could be a good outcome. That could be quite a positive outcome for the future.
So instead of replacing us, it will radically change our capabilities.
Yes, it will enable anyone who wants to have superhuman cognition.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. Augmenting humanity rather than replacing humanity. And that's actually one of the biggest points that a lot of people fail to acknowledge. I understand that the fear-based reaction and primary reaction is a very comfortable kind of initial reaction to this kind of thing, especially when the change is so uncertain and unknown. At the same time, it's the really matter of like what Elon Musk said, if you can't beat them, join them. And it would be very naive to think that this process of technological evolution that has really started since the beginning of humanity, us and technology, we have evolved together in a very collaborative manner. This is going to stop, especially since technology is progressing and evolving in an exponential rate. Let's check the Neuralink website and see if we have any kind of a new information. Nothing yet, and we're about 14 minutes away from the time that was announced as the time for the live stream for the Neuralink event. Now, I want to make a hypothetical kind of a connection, considering how Elon Musk is behind Neuralink, behind SpaceX, and behind a company called Starlink, which is a satellite constellation development project underway by American company SpaceX to develop a low-cost, high-performance satellite bus and a requisite customer ground transceivers to implement a new space-based internet communication system. SpaceX also plans to sell satellites that use a satellite bus that may be used for military, scientific, or exploratory purposes. Perhaps this system can also be used to connect the human brain to the machines, the project that Neuralink is working on through this Starlink project that is being pursued by SpaceX and by Elon Musk. I just find it very, very interesting how all of this can be kind of fit together in order to create a bigger picture, which I believe is backing up humanity, whether to send humans to Mars. And SpaceX is a huge step forward using the reusable rockets. And the viability of continuous space travel and cheaper space travel and space exploration, whether it's to send humans to Mars to start a colony or backing up human mind in the machine, it really is the matter of imagination and the limit of our societies, aside from the technology, because any technology works as well as the society that adapts it. And I think we are, as a society, we are have a lot of work to do, considering how dismissive a lot of people can be towards, majority of people are towards the latest, the most innovative, most cutting edge social, technological, and scientific advancement. This is a video of SpaceX Starlink. It's been only one day when this article came out in May 25th of this year. It's been only one day since SpaceX launched its first 60 Starlink internet satellites into orbit, and Skywatching Sloth has already spotted them soaring across the night sky. I found it to be incredible. Now, let me just, yeah, there we go. It's like a series of stars that are going across the sky. This is a satellite. Of the first 60 of the Starlink satellite, creating a satellite internet connection, first for America and Canada, I believe, and then little by little it will be expanded. It will be expanded globally. So I think it's also very important to talk about the importance of decentralization, because before that though, let's check the Neuralink website and see if we have any kind of an update. We do not have any kind of an update from the Neuralink website yet, and we don't have any kind of an update from Twitter account of Neuralink. Time is 7:50 p.m. Pacific time. We're about 10 minutes away from the time that was announced for live streaming of this event. Hopefully it will be on time. Hopefully we'll be able to share this, as I said, historic moments from my perspective together. And it's good to be here and covering it. So I think it's incredibly important. Let me read some of your messages. For Bradley was saying, Boycell saying, full moon for Gologists, at least the anniversary of earliest nuclear test. This may be the night we see the beginning of the end of death and taxes. What a great sentiment. And I certainly appreciate you sharing that wonderful sentiment in this historic night. I hope you're right. And I hope all the good things for individuals on the basis of individual rights and freedom will emerge more and more on the back of technological advancement and progress. And that's exactly why I think it's incredibly important to talk about decentralization, because any of these technological advancement and innovation and progress, as long as they're being controlled by any centralized structure of authority, whether it's a big tech monopoly or a government or a bank or an insurance company or military, it's not going to be beneficial to individuals. And I think from that perspective, it would be a very viable kind of an, scenario and outcome, that it will indeed lead to some sort of a digital slavery. However, because of the viability, technically speaking, of decentralization in this day and age, it's incredibly important to focus on how we can decentralize all of these technological advancement, technological progress, whether it's internet connectivity, or whether it's data sharing and data ownership, or artificial intelligence. So the article that I keep bringing up through my contents on my channel on YouTube is Liberation Through Radical Decentralization by Vitalik Buterin and Glenn Weil, saying wealthy societies around the world are facing a growing crisis of confidence in established authorities, stagnating economies, mounting inequality, political corruption, and the increasing monopolization of technology for the benefit of elites have provoked a populist backlash we share and are driven by these feelings of discontent. However, we also fear that the most common response on both the right and the left, a retreat from technology, markets, and international cooperation, would destroy much of what we treasure in contemporary society while worsening the problems they seek to solve. Over the last half decade, each of us has, in his own way, been working on a part of an alternative solution to find ways to harness markets and technology to radically decentralize power of all sorts and shift our reliance from authority and to formal rules. In what follows, we discuss how these projects interrelate and complement each other. So I definitely encourage you guys to go and read that article. There we go. It is up. It is on YouTube. You guys are more than welcome to go and actually check it on YouTube. Yes, I'm gonna share the link to the direct live stream if you guys are interested to check it on Neuralink page as well. But I will be once it begins, I will allow for the live stream to also be live streamed on this channel as well. Very, very exciting time, very, very exciting night. We are about 6 minutes away from this historic announcement, quite literally. Neovi, welcome, saying I don't really see how AGI can be decentralized. Seems like winner takes all with race for first AGI. Well, I actually had 2 other links to cover. I will be back very quickly to Neuralink. The sound is on for those of you who might wonder whether or not I'm gonna miss the live stream if it begins, but I'm not gonna miss it. I'll go right back to the live stream the moment it starts. I actually had 2 more links to talk about. What the fuck is decentralized artificial intelligence is one of the articles making the claim that it is the future, and then the presentation by Ben Goertzel. I also encourage you guys to go and see it, talking about decentralized AI, the power and the necessity. Ben Goertzel, of course, is the gentleman and the chief scientist behind Singularity Net, which is basically the platform to create decentralized AGI, artificial, or I like to think of the A in AI and AGI as augmented rather than artificial. So augmented general intelligence or artificial general intelligence that will be given birth to as a combination of many, many different kind of AIs rather than Google or any state or any country owning it. So it's certainly something that is very, very important to pay attention to. Obviously, there is not going to be only one kind of an AI. There will be Chinese AI, there will be American AI, there will be, who knows, maybe Israeli AI, Saudi Arabian AI, and individuals also create their own AI. But at some point, there will be a conflict, I would say, and an arms race, as was predicted by Putin, that whoever controls the AI will control the world. And it really, it's like if you can have a vehicle, an armored vehicle built by yourself or built by a company that serves the consumer, regular consumers, it's not going to be as strong and as powerful as the armored vehicle that is developed by military and state-sponsored kind of a vehicle. So the idea that Ben Goertzel has and the importance of decentralized artificial intelligence is exactly to create some sort of a viable alternative to the artificial intelligences that will be owned by, for example, US government or US military or the Chinese government or Chinese military. So individuals will be able to take direct part in developing this this higher level intelligence and the next level in human evolution. I know that it is controversial, and I know that some people, as I mentioned earlier, they want to dismiss it right off the hand, but I think it is an inevitability that we have to accept, following the trend of cooperative evolution that we've had with technology since the beginning of human history, and considering how technological progress and evolution is done in an exponential manner, we are going to merge with the machines in order to create a new species. It's not going to be machines against us. It's not going to be us against machines. It's going to be us and machines creating a new species, human 2.0, whatever you want to call it. And it's an incredibly interesting and historic and wonderful time to be alive, because we are at really the verge of many of moonshot kind of development, moonshot kind of advancements. And as I said, it really is a matter of the society that learns and educate themselves in order to adapt the technology. Any technology works as well as a society that adapts it. I keep bringing up Japan. I think Japan is decades ahead of the West and even China, because they created their societies, in their modern societies, on the basis of technological growth and technological innovation. Estonia is a very good example also in Europe. Bradley Bozell, I love this evolution emoji series that you created, from monkey to man to computer. But again, I think it's going to be human and computers creating a new species, but we do not have an emoji for that yet. So let me, while we're waiting, and we're about a minute away, see if I can read some of your messages. Neov is saying, but something like BMI seems like they can be made widely available if developed with the intent to do so. I think that's the plan of Neuralink, considering how Elon Musk has recognized and has identified the inevitability of artificial intelligence growth and artificial intelligence dominance at some point as the superior and supreme intelligence. So we'll see what's going to happen. David Elkins, welcome, man. Good to see you here. I've shared the direct link to the Neuralink YouTube page. More than 10,000 people are watching there, as you can see here, and it's awesome. The chat is going really quickly. I will go directly to the live stream when it begins. You guys are welcome to stay here, or go to the Neuralink. I just thought it would be a good excuse to have some sort of a gathering and talk a little about all the possibilities and some philosophical concepts that, you know, technology has been expanding in such a manner and at such a rate that it is affecting every aspect of our lives, whether it's politics, whether it's philosophy, whether it's religion, or many other things. DRFPV, welcome, saying, I don't think AI is a step in the right direction for mankind. Well, was nuclear weapon a right direction or right step for mankind? Yet here we are. It is not about good and bad. What is happening, in my opinion, technologically speaking, is a matter of adaptation and developments on the basis of supply and demand. I don't know what is right and what is wrong. That will be defined on the basis of objective, and I don't think we have any kind of a solid objective goal for a civilization that entire humanity agrees on. Just look at the United States political system at this point, that they can't even agree on whether or not it's good to let people in without going through a process or not. Vlad the Impaler saying maybe AI can teach agents how to try. The Forest, hello, welcome. Good to have you. Gabe Krell saying internet dominates communication, Google dominates facts, AI will dominate planning and creation. Very interesting thought. Very interesting thought. I don't think there is any aspect of humanity that cannot be replicated and improved by artificial intelligence. Creativity is perhaps going to be the last frontier, and that is one of the most important aspects of our humanity that we have to really notice and focus on. Our spirituality, our creativity, in the sense that whatever that the machines will have, I don't want to say a harder time, but it takes longer for machines to replicate. I think those are the parts that now us as society, as civilization, are being forced to focus on, that what really is the definition of humanity and what really worth saving and what really worth improving and augmenting by the use of technological advancement, including artificial intelligence. Matthew Evans, welcome. 73 people watching. Wonderful. Wonderful to have you here. I have shared the direct link to the Neuralink live stream YouTube. I'm sharing it again if you guys are interested to watch it directly on their website. It's very, very awesome to see that more than 14,000 people are waiting to watch this historic event and this historic announcement. The moment that it starts, I will remove my portion of the screen and I will stream what is being live streamed on the Neuralink live stream. So you guys are more than welcome to stay here. I will be back after the live stream to talk briefly, maybe sum it up a little bit before signing off. So you guys are more than welcome to come back for that as well. Oleon051 saying, if we are not evolving as our population grows beyond 10 billion, we are doomed. We are certainly evolving, and that's, I think, part of the inevitability of it. It's very Darwinian, actually, because some people would say that this is actually very against Darwin kind of philosophy and Darwin principle, because we are creating a higher intelligence in our own environment. But the reality is that the bottom line is this survival of the fittest has always been determined and defined on the basis of the most adaptable, not the strongest, not the smartest, but the most adaptable. And I think this is not any different. It's a matter of who is going to adapt to this new change, new stage of human evolution. Perhaps the most significant part of this evolution, however, is that how we are taking control of the evolution in our own hands. Can it go wrong? Absolutely it can go wrong. But it is where we are, and it's very, very difficult to imagine, in my opinion, even impossible, to reverse this process. Going back and looking back has never been a viable option, even though people are trying really hard to do that. And it makes sense. You know, you try to hold on to whatever kind of identity, whatever kind of structure that creates your ideals and your values, but all of them, especially in this era of democratization of information, are being challenged and are being disrupted very, very quickly. So yes, I think the most adaptable are going to be the most successful, evolutionary speaking. Bradley Bazell saying, for 50,000 years we have been born, we have worked and produced and then died. That is the old definition of humanity. Some won't be able to let go, but through this we may live to see all of the world, the stars and planets of other galaxies. I absolutely agree with you. I think you're spot on, and I'm looking forward to that period for humanity. We have already started living in that period. Jake Zamora is asking, any idea what Neuralink live will consist of? Jake Zamora, I actually mentioned an article from MIT Technology Review saying that we think Neuralink, which develops brain-machine interfaces, is recording from the neurons of monkeys as a stepping stone towards humans. So it will be very interesting to see that if that's actually the case, because it's going to be unbelievably substantial and significant if that actually what has happened with respect to Neuralink, and it's going to be incredibly controversial. The entire concept of humanity is being disrupted as a result of merging with machines and augmentation. And I made this argument yesterday when I talked about the coming live stream of Neuralink, that at some point transhumanism, merging with machines in order to augment our biological experience, will be considered a civil rights issue. And it's not that hard to imagine considering how more and more people have the opportunity to express themselves in their own unique and subjective manner and subjective way. So we'll see what's going to happen. I'm very, very excited about what is happening now. DeForest saying, have you heard about Peter Thiel, Google, and China situation? I did a video about Peter Thiel and how he called Google treasonous and called on CIA and FBI to launch a probe on the China ties. So you're more than welcome. I know someone mentioned that people hadn't received notification about my new videos today, but what can I do about Google and YouTube bias, especially when it's about Peter Thiel accusing Google of treasonous activities? But it is there. You're more than welcome to go and check it on my channel. I'm a big fan of Peter Thiel, and it's very interesting kind of development. Footprint saying, I'm so into Neuralink, I really want to see it progress. Yeah, same here. Absolutely. David Elkins, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for your kind words. It's my pleasure, and I'm glad to have you here. Still waiting for Neuralink live stream. More than 16,000 people are there, and this chat is happening so fast. It's impossible to read any of these messages. I think that's why some of these smaller kind of setup is more personal and more intimate, to have some kind of like a watching parties for this kind of live stream. So this is what is happening here, and I've shared, and one more time, let me share the link directly to the Neuralink announcement and Neuralink live stream for their coming event. You guys are more than welcome to stay here or just go and watch it directly on their page. It's completely up to you. Justin White, welcome, saying, I don't know if somebody already asked us, but if we do somehow find a way to link to AI internet, do you think it would change one's personality? Absolutely it would, because it will change your objective goal, and there is a concept within the AI realm and the field of AI that is called alignment problem and alignment issue. Thank you so much for your donation, Olian051. So the alignment issue is the matter of whether or not the objective and the goal of the artificial intelligence is going to be aligned with the human objective and human goals and intentions. And it's not going to be aligned because the necessities and limitations that we are experiencing as biological beings are substantially and significantly different than the kind of alignment, whatever it's going to be, whatever kind of objective and the goal that the artificial intelligence is going to have. It's going to be very, very different. And that is actually one of the best arguments in order to merge with the machines, because if we cannot know what objective and what goals machines are going to have, it's incredibly risky to basically risk this unknown with respect to a higher intelligence, a superior intelligence that is going to be created. And it's being created by us. We are creating our new augmentation in the form of, right now, narrow artificial intelligence, but at some point augmented or artificial general intelligence. Joshua Smith, thank you so much for your donation. I really appreciate it. I hope that you guys are enjoying this interaction. I keep saying when I create the content pretty much on a daily basis on YouTube, with the exception of the weekends, that the best part of this interactive medium is this exchange of information and ideas, and it's through this exchange that we all can learn more And it is only through information and education that we can make informed and educated decisions, including whether or not we want to merge with the machines and all the possibilities. Russian bot saying, I'm good with staying human. You guys want to be as smart as Alexa, who can answer simple questions, makes contradictory statements with no memory or reference or to conflict, can't compute. Well, I don't think it should be a mandatory kind of an upgrade or augmentation for anybody to merge with the machines. Whether or not that will be the case, that remains to be seen. But I think it's also should be completely available to those of us who are interested in merging with machines and augmenting our biological experience of this reality that we're experiencing, to go ahead and do it without forcing other people to pay for, like any other group of people. That's why I'm saying, and why I believe that transhumanism, merging with machines and augmenting humanity, will become a civil rights issue in the coming years. Politicians will run on that platform, I believe, in the coming years, and there are already political parties all around the world on the basis of transhumanism. Denmon, welcome, saying interested in transhumanism, but I think it has the potential to be our downfall. I know Neuralink can't do this, as we pleb normies understand it to function, but wouldn't want my consciousness in a cloud. That certainly is a perspective, and anything can be our downfall. Someone mentioned earlier that he doesn't recognize artificial intelligence as a good or correct step for humanity, and I made the argument that neither was the atomic bomb, yet here we are. This is not about good and bad, this is not about right and wrong, because all of those kind of evaluations are being made on the basis of subjective goals and ideals and intentions. And I don't think we can name one single thing that all of us as human civilization can agree on as the final goal or an objective. So, as I said, certainly people shouldn't be forced to do anything they don't want to do, and certainly people who want to do something shouldn't force other people or expect other people to finance them or give them any kind of a special right. We'll see what's going to happen. The problem, however, is that when you evolve as a higher being, higher species, it would be very difficult to this is a concept of singularity that is being that was introduced by Ray Kurzweil and others. But I think Ray Kurzweil articulated perhaps better than others that the point of singularity is when machines, one computer intelligence will surpass the collective intelligence of human civilization on this planet. It would be impossible to predict what's going to happen, and that's again one of the best arguments in order to merging with the machines, in order to not being left behind in the evolutionary process. If people don't want to do it, though, people don't want to do it. BIGT, welcome, saying 20 years ago, nobody knows why we're supposed to use wireless phones, and look where we are now. Absolutely. Our life is all about our smartphones. Absolutely. Absolutely, I agree with you. We are still waiting for the highly anticipated live stream by Neuralink. I have shared the direct link to their YouTube live stream. I will stream it as well once it begins on this channel. You guys are more than welcome to stay here or go and check it out on their page. DRFPV saying, how about issues with someone taking control over us? And that is exactly the point of decentralization. Please go and read. I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. Keep that in mind. I'm sharing my opinion with you guys. I have nothing to sell, and I certainly am not promoting a religion or anything like that. You can accept it or not. Don't believe me. Just do your own research. I'll provide you with links. But please, if you're interested in the possibility of not being controlled by centralized structures of authorities, go and read Liberation Through Radical Decentralization. And also this video that I was going to show, but then we got a notification for the live stream called Decentralized AI, The Power and the Necessity by Dr. Ben Goertzel, who is the chief scientist of Singularity Net. There is a way not being owned by centralized structures of authority. And technically speaking, it has It's a viability now. So it's important to educate ourselves about it and be informed about it, because only through education and information we can make educated and informed decisions. The SSAPIA League, welcome, saying Neuralink should have long-term financing options available for people who want to have brain implants but cannot afford the upfront costs, similar to how student loans are available to students. That's such a good idea. That's a very, very good idea. Alcor, which they are a cryonics company that, when you get sick, for example, you decide to freeze your body rather than dying. Or even when you, I think even if you die, they can preserve your body in a cryonic ways. They also have the option that you can provide life insurance through Alcor that will finance that process for you, so it can be cryogenically, I can say the term correctly, but your body can be preserved, or your brain can be preserved until science gets to a point that you can perhaps be brought back to life. Qualum, welcome, saying non-transhumanists might become an inferior race. I agree with you, and I think what happened with respect to Neanderthals and how Homo sapiens basically annihilated them, and the way that we are treating chimps. We don't necessarily want to destroy chimps. Ben Goertzel was talking to Joe Rogan about it, and it was very interesting. Joe Rogan said, we don't really care about ants, or we don't care about ants at all. And he said, not necessarily. Like, if you're building a house, you don't care about killing maybe hundreds or thousands of ants, but you don't want to make ants extinct. So we do care about inferior species and beings, intelligently speaking, to a certain degree. And I agree with you that that is a possibility, and that is a concern. And again, one of the reasons that the argument in favor of merging with technology can be made and can be validated. Tom Burton, welcome, saying resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. That's what I believe too. Stockbot saying Neuralink will not live up to the hype. I can't really see into the future. Maybe that's the case, maybe that is not the case. Bradley Boisel saying we are susceptible to gas bombs, organic disease, aging. List everything that can kill us, then cancel out the possibility that can be rejected by the advancement about to be made to mankind. I absolutely agree with you. I think you're absolutely correct. Qualum saying chances are the first developments are geared toward medical purposes, also military purposes. Military is ahead of every other fields and every other aspects of our society with respect to technology and artificial intelligence, especially now more than any other time before, because the United States has a competitor named China. And China, because of this centralized structure, how everything is working in harmony in a centralized manner, government, corporation, and military, they don't have to go through Congress, they don't have to adjust their direction based on public opinion. And I think the only thing at this point with respect to artificial intelligence that China is missing is the brain that is creating the initial ideas for artificial intelligence. That's why Chinese have a lot of people planted within academia and other parts of the United States socio-political dynamic, but also the strongest and the most powerful supercomputer in the world. That Chinese were ahead of the United States for years. Now United States is ahead of China. But it's only through this competition that we'll see more and more and faster kind of an advancement. We'll see what's going to happen with respect to US and China, but I absolutely believe that military use is the primary usage for any kind of technology. Russian bot saying humans annihilated Neanderthal, but you said it won't be mandatory. I'm saying it shouldn't be mandatory. It should not be mandatory. Absolutely. It should not be mandatory by a government or an institution to tell people you have to merge with the machines. It's the decisions that people have to make. But when you have a superior species, we don't know what's going to happen. That's the whole point of singularity, that the change is going to be so drastic that we cannot know what's going to happen. There are different scenarios that are being laid down and introduced. One is that humans will be treated as pets by superior intelligence. Some people are saying humans will be able to live their lives in some parts of the world. Artificial intelligence will be able to live in some other parts of the world. And some people are saying that artificial intelligence would have no need or use for humans to begin with. Not artificial intelligence, but this new species that will be created as the result of merging. So it is this uncertainty that is creating a whole bunch of different stories and scenarios for Hollywood and scientists and sci-fi writers and people like Elon Musk to provide solutions. That's, I think, the most important thing, that you can contemplate on the positive or negative outcome. We don't know what's going to happen. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But we can manage risks, possible risks, by coming up with solutions. And I think Elon Musk is doing a wonderful job with that respect, both with SpaceX, Starlink, and Neuralink. The Forest saying, don't you think a prototype is out since Data-Led said they already made a bidirectional interface? Supposedly, DARPA has been working on it for a long time. Annie Jacobson, who's an investigative journalist, wrote a book about DARPA called Pentagon's Brain. I've been reading that, and it's very revealing. I won't be surprised if Pentagon has already managed to develop some sort of a BCI. But for mainstream and for the consumer usage, we don't have anything close to what Neuralink supposedly have at least had in mind, but now supposedly are going to announce whatever it is that they're working on. It's 11:23 Eastern time, and it's 8:24 Pacific time. We're still waiting for the live stream of Neuralink to start. I'm looking forward to it. Once again, tonight is a very historic night. As I mentioned, it's the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 moon mission, and it was also mentioned that it's the anniversary of first nuclear test as well, and we have the full moon here in South Florida. Stars are aligned, and I'm looking forward to hear this historic announcement by Neuralink, a company that is backed and founded by a wonderful human being, in my perspective, Elon Musk. Russian bot saying computers only know what humans tell them, therefore they are and always will be inferior, plus solar flares or EMP will cause mass extinction. Well, computers at this point rely on data entry, yes, but it's not going to stay like that. And that's one of the reasons that 5G networks are so important, and ubiquitous computing and big data and Internet of Things are going to change the entire social structure of our civilization. Foxfire Reviews, welcome, saying the chat spam on the Neuralink live stream was so bad that they had to disable the chat. I don't really blame them. It was crazy. Yeah, you're right. It is disabled. Let's refresh this page and see what is happening. We're still waiting for, yeah, look at that. Chat is disabled for this live stream because most people, they just talk about nonsense over there. I saw a bunch of people screaming Yang Gang, and some saying Hillary something. Who can, whatever. This is the state of humanity. These kind of chat rooms, I'm not talking about our chat room, because smaller it is, more manageable it becomes, and more productive this interaction becomes. But when it's like thousands of people are chatting at the same time, it really is a very interesting reveal of a state of humanity overall. Thanks for letting me know, Foxfire Reviews. It's an interesting kind of an outcome. Big T saying, does Elon use his Neuralink for himself at the moment? Very good question. If I were him, I would be first would be the first person. I would not be the first person because there are a lot of risks that come with it, and I think we're still a couple of stages away from human implementation. As I said, MIT Technology Review has predicted that Neuralink is going to announce that a recording from the neurons of monkeys as a stepping stone towards humans are going to be introduced tonight. We'll see if that's the case or not, and it certainly is going to be magnificent and unbelievable if that is actually the case. Timothy Torres, welcome, saying, my concern was when OpenAI went private, keeping this transformative power to a select few. You're very right. You're very correct. And I think that's the point of Singularity Net and what Ben Goertzel is trying to do, that not letting centralized structures of authorities, whether it's big tech companies or states or military, to own the ultimate AGI, augmented or artificial general intelligence, and allow individuals, whether developers or otherwise, to have some part in the development of the ultimate general intelligence, augmented or artificial general intelligence. Splick Music saying, when does it start? It's supposed to start about half an hour ago, but we are still waiting to see what is happening. It's certainly adding to the excitement. Naomi saying, Elon's gonna walk out with a talking chimp. How amazing would that be? Wow. Beer Archive saying, I would like to know what my dog is thinking. I'm for Neuralink. Rick and Morty, that I'm wearing Rick and Morty shirt tonight as well. They have a wonderful episode about augmenting dog intelligence and the kind of consequence that has had for the Smith family. So feel free to go and check that episode. I think it's season 1, episode 2. Lehigh Ortiz, welcome, saying AI is a learned pattern of human behavior all in a box. Very interesting kind of a perspective. We're still waiting for a Neuralink live stream. More than 19,000 people, even though it's slowed down the number of people who've been adding. I think it's amazing that almost 20,000 people are waiting to hear what is happening. At the same time, you would have maybe expect more people would show up, but whatever. John 23Z saying, if you get chipped, they can zap you with the death towers or drone anytime. Well, they can also poison the water right now at any time. Or they can gas us right now. I don't understand what kind of, how can I argue with that? Yes, any kind of a negative outcome is a possibility. Nobody is saying that it's going to be wonderful. It is about the inevitability of ubiquitous computing and artificial intelligence that will at some point become artificial or augmented general intelligence, and how us as humans, as a human civilization, have the chance of not only competing with these machines, but also merging and evolving into a new species, a hybrid species, by merging with them. And Neuralink is a solution. Nobody's saying that it's a perfect solution. That's why we are having this exchange. McKay Wadsworth, welcome, saying, do you think this will be commercially available to us or the top 1%? Think about it this way. When cell phones came out first, they were huge, they were dysfunctional, and they were very, very expensive. By the time that we got to the level of having smartphones right now, like this smartphone, this is a Google phone. It's extremely strong and powerful phone, and I paid around $350 for it. It's much powerful than the primary cell phones and much cheaper and far more functional. So by the time it gets to the point that it's more functional and more viable, it will be, in my opinion, cost effective, as is the case with all technological tools and advancement following the Moore's law. I think it would be available to the general public. Perhaps in the beginning it will be only available to the 1%, but you don't want to adapt the first generation of any kind of technology. It's going to be glitchy, and you don't want to mess with that, especially when you're dealing with your brain. So wait until, I would say, the third generation of any technology before adapting it. Jack Zamora is saying, will we still be ourselves even if we merge? That is a philosophical question, my friend. Then we have to define who we really are. Who is the definition of yourself to begin with? If you take away everything that you assume on the basis of your condition and environment, what is left? If you treat it like that, and I think psychedelics are doing a wonderful job, not that I'm advocating for the use of psychedelics, but they're doing a really good job in order to peel this onion of who we really are and get to the core of it and understand who we really are. And I think this is the time, because of the technological disruption, that we as a species and a civilization, we are forced to look into ourselves and realize what are real values, whether or not our ethics and morality are objective, and we have all agreed upon it, which I don't believe we have whatsoever. And I think it is actually an opportunity for humanity and for individuals in order to express themselves in a subjective manner by merging with technology. And we've been doing that since the beginning of human history. If you look at any society, any individual, any empire, any kingdom, any military, the ones who adapted the latest, most cutting edge, most innovative technology have always came as the victor from any kind of equation that they had to deal with. So humanity is not different. Lihe Oret saying singularity is the new beginning. I absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. Pat McIntosh, welcome, saying it'll just prove we live in a simulation. It certainly is a step towards that direction, creating a very good argument for the simulation theory. Carton, welcome, saying what happened? The life hasn't started yet. The life has not started yet, but more than 20,000 people are waiting on the Neuralink channel, even though they have disabled the chat. People took advantage out of the freedom that they had. The forest saying, I can't wait any longer. We've waited 2 years, man. Let's wait a little longer. Yeah, the simulation theory is indeed very, very interesting. Carton saying, any good source to learn machine learning? Indeed. I believe it's Udacity. Yep, go to udacity.com and you have many nano-degree programs that they have. Udacity, don't mix and don't confuse it with Udemy. Go to udacity.com and they have a number of completely affordable and completely doable and quick, relatively speaking, courses with respect to artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I've made this argument that it is this online education that really has to replace, as an alternative, our education system, because our education system at this point is not viable. HK Villarreal, welcome, saying, when was the live stream supposed to start? It's supposed to start, according to Neuralink Twitter, at 8 p.m. Pacific time, which would have been 11 p.m. Eastern time. It's 8:35 Pacific time, and we're still waiting, along with more than 20,000 people who are waiting on Neuralink's YouTube channel. We'll see how much longer they're gonna go. I'm gonna wait for as long as it's going to take. This is an incredibly historic kind of a night. Naomi saying, can you speed up the simulation to when the live stream starts? Wandering Adventure 42, welcome, saying, let me guess where there too many Area 51 memes. Man, that Area 51 Facebook event page is becoming quite something. I'm going to be doing a video, doing a segment about it, talking about it tomorrow. This supposedly 1 million people who have said yes in order to raiding basically Area 51. I don't think it's a good idea at all, but we'll see what's going to happen. Ark Mabat saying, where is the live stream? We're waiting for live stream, man. We are waiting for it. It's supposed to start half an hour ago, but they haven't started. They disabled the chat under live stream on their YouTube page. But we're waiting. Amir Iqbal, welcome, saying, not for humans yet. Neuralink wanted an animal testing lab in San Francisco. That is very consistent with the MIT article saying that this announcement is probably going to be recording from the neurons of monkeys as a stepping stone towards humans. I didn't know about the animal testing lab in San Francisco, but it's very consistent with what we have known. The Impractical Transhumanist, welcome, saying basically Neuralink is not ready for the limelight. Maybe they have some sort of, who knows what's going on. Anorak, welcome, saying it should have started 35 minutes ago. That's right, it should have started 35 minutes ago. But you know, we don't get what we want from life all the time. So here we are. Pat McIntosh saying the simulation is processed through thoughts, and the best way to spread those stories is by maximizing the throughput of the population having access to them. That's a very interesting argument in favor of that. Absolutely. Anurag saying there could be some big breakthroughs. Certainly can be. Logan Piercefield, welcome. Saying, just let's talk about the debate between Neuralink following standalone computing or not, also known as connected to the internet or not. I think the live stream is about to begin. I'm hearing some, well, I was hearing some static, but I think something is happening. It came to my ears. Maybe you guys have heard it as well. The moment that it starts, I will remove my side of the screen and I'll let you guys watch it. You're more than welcome to stay here on this channel and watch it. Welcome to all of you 356 people who are watching it on my channel. I also share it again, the link to the Neuralink YouTube page, so you can watch it there if you are interested in that. Logan Piercefield, I'm very interested to talk about that. Maybe we can do it at some point, and maybe after this announcement. Neuralink has the new Twitter post saying presentation beginning shortly. Livestream is now up. So we're about to begin. Excitement is boiling up. Boiling up. Justin White saying, what if Elon Musk is doing all of this to fight off the aliens at Area 51? Certainly is a very good idea for a movie or a book. Tom Burton saying, thanks for being such a friendly host. My pleasure, man. I love this. This is awesome. This is why the mainstream media and legacy media is failing, because it does not have the interactivity like what we are experiencing. You cannot just have a monologue and tell people what to think. This is the era of democratization of information, and we all can learn as a result of exchange of information and ideas. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here. I'm hearing some statics again. It's about to begin, I believe. Feel free, guys, to stay here or go and check it out on the Neuralink YouTube channel. After the live stream, I will be back to talk a little more to wrap up the night, and you're more than welcome to also join me for that. Thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you, hosting you on this channel. Saya Smith, hey, is there anywhere else to watch? Yes, I have shared the link a number of times to the direct stream on Neuralink page on YouTube. You're more than welcome to stay here or go and watch it there. Qualem saying, keep up the commentary. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Trying to catch up with some of your messages. Wonderful to have you guys here, and I love this interaction. Lock 2020 saying, this YouTube live stream is coming directly from Elon's head via Neuralink. Very interesting. I don't know if you guys are hearing the voices, the slight voices. I believe that they are preparing and they're getting ready. We must be very, very close to the stream. Pat McIntyre saying, Neuralink will be about maximizing communication with those connected. It'll be important to have a diverse population. Absolutely, but it really is a matter of people whether or not they want to adapt into this technology. I've heard it from many people that this is a mark of the beast, and it says in the Bible that you shouldn't be doing that. How are you going to convince those people that no, that might not be the case, and you might actually benefit from doing that? But you know, this is the kind of, that's exactly what I mean. That technology, any technology works as well and as good as a society that adapts that technology. Just reading your messages. Rahul Sanad saying the other channel is so boring. They disabled the chat. People have taken advantage out of the freedom given to them by Neuralink. The state of humanity where we are at this point, you know. So something to have in mind, and it's ironic how we are dealing with augmentation of humanity when the company that promoting that augmentation had to disable the chat because people took advantage out of the freedom that was given to them for free to express yourself in any way that you want. Arkmabat saying, I recently read through the music file for Skevin's data jack, and he mentions not needing a physical data jack, mechanical telepathy. Very interesting, very interesting. Many different possibilities. Many different possibilities. And it really is through competition, if you think about it, that choices are being provided to individuals. So I disagree with the sides for whatever reason that they're saying something should not be done. If something is happening, or saying, don't say this, don't do this, we shouldn't adapt into this kind of technology, we shouldn't accept that, we shouldn't look at that, because it is through communication and competition that choices will be provided to individuals. And that's exactly when freedom can have any kind of a meaning, on the individual basis, when individuals have a choice to accept or reject the choices that are provided, the options that are provided to them. Other than that, centralized structures of authorities are failures as the system. That's why we're experiencing the kind of socio-political dynamic globally, not only in the United States, not only in Canada, not only in Western Europe, globally, as the direct result of democratization of information that has been empowered and enabled by the generalization and commercialization of internet. Pluto Death Sauce, welcome, saying enjoying this so far, glad to see the stream with some early commentary. Thanks, and keep up the great stream. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this communication. Pankaj Saini, welcome, saying keep doing this. Neuralink is going to hire you. To do what? I'm not a scientist, man. I'm just a commentator. I'm sharing with you guys what I think, and I hear from you guys what you think. And hopefully through this interaction and exchange of information and knowledge and thoughts, we all can learn something and gain something that we can use towards our personal journey. So Abdulio Cerceno, hello to you from Panama, Central America. Welcome. Sergey Tiraspolsky, thank you so much for your donation. I really appreciate it. That's amazing how generous you guys are. I haven't even asked for money. I'm not doing this for money, quite honestly. I have a job, and I love interacting with like-minded individuals and audience to share my opinion, and then hear the result of those opinions and those thoughts being heard, and then those individuals who've heard it and participated in this communication express their thoughts and ideas, so I can also learn as a result of this interaction. Thank you so much for being here. You definitely are a very, very big part of this interactive medium, and we have this opportunity to come together. 413 of us so far, well, 414 I guess with me, because of this amazing, historic announcement that is coming by Neuralink. Keep in mind that tonight is the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 moon mission. So stars are aligned for a historic announcement by Neuralink, and this quite possibly is going to be a very, very big step forward for humanity with respect to our evolution and our progress as a species and as civilization. Sergey Tiraspolsky saying, keep sharing the decentralization wisdom. I'm a believer. I'm a believer in decentralization. I believe it is only through decentralization that we can truly come to individual liberty. And as I said, freedom can only be defined on the basis of individual liberty and individual choices and options. Giovanni M., thank you so much. I appreciate it. Glad to have you here. 007 Mace saying, if the government says you must have Neuralink implemented, then yeah, it's probably the mark, especially if it has relevance to 666. The governments have absolutely no business telling people what to do and what not to do. It should not be taken as a default state, and it is exactly as the solution against centralized structures of authorities, whether big tech monopolies or states or military, that we have to come to realizing that centralization is the way to go. I think something is happening. Something did happen. Let's hope that we're starting. There we go. I let you guys watch this live stream one more time. I'm going to share the link to the direct page.
It's called neurotransmitters.
And I will be back after
Neurotransmitters are
the
released from the end of an axon
live stream.
in response to an electrical spike called an action potential. When a cell receives enough of the right kind of neurotransmitter input, a chain reaction is triggered that causes an action potential to fire, and the neuron to in turn relay messages to its own downstream synapses. Action potentials produce an electric field that spreads from the neuron and can be detected by placing electrodes nearby, allowing recording of the information represented by a neuron.
Hello, everybody. So that video was not Shutterstock. That was actually Neuralink. So that's actual video from the company. So if you want to get a sense for what it's like to work at Neuralink, that video is indicative of the atmosphere of Neuralink. It's an incredibly talented team, and you're going to hear a lot from them tonight. So we're going to actually go quite into depth on what we're doing, why we're doing, how we're doing it, and I'm just incredibly impressed with the caliber of talent at Neuralink. And in fact, the main reason for doing this presentation is recruiting. So we really want to have the best talent in the world come and work at Neuralink. Anyone that's interested in trying to solve this problem, and that's actually the primary purpose for this presentation. So. Okay, so the why of Neuralink, just to go over it, is I think it's important for us to address brain-related diseases. Everyone, if you survive cancer and heart disease, the odds are that you will have some brain-related disorder. So it'll be like Alzheimer's or dementia, and if you don't, friends and family will for sure. And I think unless we have some sort of brain-machine interface that can solve brain ailments of all kinds, whether it's an accident or congenital or any kind of brain-related disorder, or a spinal disorder, if you know somebody who's broken their neck or broken their spine, we can solve that with a chip. And this is something that I think most people don't quite understand yet. And we're going to go over in detail how this is possible. But I think there's an incredible amount we can do to solve brain disorders, damage, and all this will occur actually, I think, quite slowly. So I do want to emphasize that it's not going to be like suddenly Neuralink will have this incredible neural lace and start taking over people's brains. Okay. It will take a long time. So you'll see it coming. So getting FDA approval for implantable or devices of any kind is quite difficult, and this will be a slow process where we will gradually increase the issues that we solve until ultimately we can do a full brain-machine interface, meaning that we can ultimately, yeah, this is going to sound pretty weird, but achieve a sort of symbiosis with artificial intelligence. So, but this is not a mandatory thing. This is a thing that you can choose to have if you want. And this is something I think that's going to be really important at a civilization level scale. So. And I've said a lot about AI over the years, but I think even in a benign AI scenario, we will be left behind. And so, and hopefully it is a benign scenario, but I think with a high bandwidth brain-machine interface, I think we can actually go along for the ride. And we can effectively have the option of merging with AI. I think this is extremely important. And if you think about your limbic system and your cortex, your limbic system is kind of your primal needs and wants, and it's like where a lot of your emotions are coming from. And then the cortex is like the thinking, planning part of your brain. And I haven't met anyone who wants to get rid of either the cortex or the limbic system. So clearly they work together well. Even though your cortex is in principle far smarter than your limbic system, everybody wants to keep the limbic system and their cortex. So hopefully we can have a tertiary layer, which is the kind of a digital superintelligence layer. And in fact, you already have this layer. So it's your phone and your laptop, and the constraint is just how well you interface the input and output speed. So the output speed is especially slow since most people are typing with thumbs these days. So you have a very slow output speed. Your input speed is much faster due to vision, but the thing that will ultimately constrain our ability to be symbiotic with AI is bandwidth. So in the limit, after solving a bunch of brain-related diseases, there is the existential, it's mitigation of the existential threat of AI, or yeah, this is the point of it. So creating a well-aligned future, that's the idea.
Composed of nearly 100 billion cells called neurons. Neurons come in many complex shapes, but generally they have a dendritic arbor, a cell body called a soma, and an axon. The neurons of your brain connect to form a large network through axon-dendrite junctions called synapses. At these connection points, neurons communicate with each other using chemical signals called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are released from the end of an axon in response to an electrical spike called an action potential. When a cell receives enough of the right kind of neurotransmitter input, a chain reaction is triggered that causes an action potential to fire, and the neuron to in turn relay messages to its own downstream synapses. Action potentials produce an electric field that spreads from the neuron and can be detected by placing electrodes nearby, allowing recording of the information represented by a neuron.
We thought we'd play that twice. It's so good you have to play it twice. Well, I think like a lot of people in the audience, there's a wide range of knowledge about neurons. I mean, some people view the brain as like this incredibly mystical thing that you cannot interface with the brain, and then some people are aware of deep brain stimulation, such as occurs for Parkinson's patients. So trying to address the broad range of understanding. I mean, neurons, essentially, there's that whole idea, what if we were just a brain in a vat? This is often posed by philosophers, except we are a brain in a vat, and that vat is our skull. Everything that you perceive, feel, hear, think, it's all action potentials. It's all it's neural spikes. And it feels so real. It feels very real. But these are all impulses from neurons, what's called a spike. And our goal is to record from and stimulate spikes in neurons and do so in a way that is orders of magnitude more than anything that's been done to date, and safe and good enough that you can, it's not like a major operation. It's sort of equivalent to sort of a LASIK type of thing. So where you can sort of sit down, machine does this thing, and you can walk away within a few hours. And that's it. And you're not even in a hospital. So like there's basically, in terms of key points that are worth taking away, the system that we designed in version 1 is capable of on the order of 10,000 electrodes. So each chip, which is 4 by 4 millimeters, is capable of 1,000 electrodes, or has 1,000 electrodes, and we think doing up to 10 is feasible. So this is in contrast to the best FDA-approved system, which is like a Parkinson's deep brain stimulation thing, which would have on the order of 10 electrodes. So the system, even in version 1 that we're going to unveil today, is capable of 1,000 times more electrodes than the best system out there, and they're all read and write. So this is really quite, I think, I mean, for something to be 1,000 times more than what is publicly approved is quite a big difference. And this will get better with subsequent versions. Now this slide may seem a little generic, because like everything's got robust electronics and algorithms at this point, but not threads. So the I feel like I'm in Transcendence. Actually, I was in Transcendence. So there's very tiny threads that are about a tenth, roughly, of the cross-sectional area of a human hair. So they're extremely tiny threads. In fact, the threads that we have, like I said, even in version 1, are about the same size as a neuron. So if you're going to go stick something in your brain, you want it to not be giant, you want it to be tiny, and to be approximately on par with the things that are already there, the neurons. So this is about the size of a neuron, each thread. And then you really need this to be done with a robot, because it's very tiny and it needs to be very precise. So you don't want to pierce a blood vessel. So so each thread, the robot looks sort of basically through a microscope and inserts each electrode specifically, bypassing any vasculature, any kind of like blood vessel, and making sure that it can be inserted without causing trauma or minimal trauma. Yeah, it's not zero, but you won't notice it. That's the important part. You won't yeah, you won't feel a thing. Yeah, anyways, obviously algorithms. So just to give you a sense of scale, this is how tiny the threads are. That is not even a big finger, that is a small finger. So these threads are just like I said, way smaller than hair, and there's 1,000 of them. And this is what the robot looks like. It's sort of quite a complex device, but it all comes down to a very tiny point. So we want to just like, you see the robot on the left, and then what looks like the needles for insertion next to a penny, but in fact the actual needle that gets inserted is way tinier. It's that little tiny thing where the arrow is pointing. That's actually the size of the needle. It's about 24 microns in diameter. Extremely small. It's so small you can't really even see it in the picture with the penny. And then this is your brain on uranium. No, that's not really. That's agar. So you can get a sense for the robot doing the electrode insertion. That's a very zoomed in view. So they're all very tiny, and the robot is very selectively applying them very delicately. And then this is what the chip looks like. So there's action potentials. So each one of those represents one electrode. So there would be up to 10,000 of these lines. Yeah. So I guess it's always difficult to say. There's going to be there's a lot more in this presentation. So in terms of things that I think are important to bear in mind, this I think has a very good purpose, which is to cure important diseases, and ultimately to help secure humanity's future as a civilization relative to AI. The threads are very tiny, and there's a lot of them, and they're very carefully placed. And the operation on a per chip basis, it involves just a 2 millimeter incision, which is dilated to 8 millimeters, and then the chip is placed through that, and then it goes back to being 2 millimeters, and you can basically glue it shut. You don't even need a stitch. So, and then the interface to the chip is wireless. So you have no wires poking out of your head. Very, very important. So it's basically Bluetooth to your phone. Because we'll have to watch the App Store updates for that one. Make sure we don't have a driver issue. Updating. But the key is like this is something that is going to be not stressful. Our goal is not stressful to put in. Should work well, hopefully. We'll check it out very carefully before it becomes obviously FDA approved. And it's wireless. So this I think has tremendous potential, and we hope to have this aspirationally in a human patient before the end of next year. So this is not far. And then, as I mentioned earlier, this is the main purpose of this presentation is recruiting, and we need very talented people in all these areas. So it's a lot of very talented people are needed to make this ultimately successful. And then, speaking of talented people, let me hand it over to Max. Yeah.
I need the clicker. Thank you. Thank you. I'm Max Hodak. I'm the president of Neuralink. I remember a couple years ago when we started talking about the idea of Neuralink and that there might be a company and whether this was even a good idea. I remember my first reaction was that I wasn't sure that this actually was a good idea, that the technology was there yet. And I think Elon has this incredible optimism where he'll pierce through these imagined constraints and show you that really a lot more is possible than you really think is today. And you have to be very careful telling him that something's impossible. It better be limited by a law of physics or you're going to end up looking stupid. And so I've wanting to build a neural interface has really been like a central goal of my life for basically as long as I can remember. I think like we talk about AI being potentially the last invention that we have. I think that a high bandwidth BMI might be like really the first invention in many ways of like the next chapter of us. It's just really, like as Elon alluded to earlier, everything about your experience, your thoughts, your memories, it's all in your brain and represented in the firing statistics of action potentials. So, all right, so just what is a BMI? And we'll go through this fairly quickly, I think. So you start with hopefully a brain and a machine. But the machine is just a stand-in for the outside world. It could be another brain, it could be software, it could be a robotic arm. But you want to receive energy from that world and impart through the senses like vision and audition and impart energy back into the world through things like motor control. And that language that they use to communicate, putting aside the interface hardware for a second, it's very important to understand what that is because people ask like, oh, can I talk to my dog or can I do these things? But it's important to understand what that language is. And that language, in the most general sense, is information. To a first approximation, everything is information. But we just consider here the information represented in neurons. And so consider two like toy neurons. One, so these lines are imagined action potentials. And so imagine a neuron that fires very regularly like a metronome. Like this doesn't tell us anything. There's no information conveyed in this signal. We don't learn anything from it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, imagine a neuron that fires completely randomly. This also doesn't tell us anything. This also doesn't carry any information. Now we know that these two degenerate cases are not what neurons do because if you fit a model from recorded neural activity to behavior of things like a cursor of a patient or a subject that's implanted and you correlate these, then you can build a graph that looks like this. And this is a figure from a classic paper in this field, from like the academic heritage of this field from 2003. I think that actually some of the authors of this paper are in the audience today. And you can see it's the x-axis is number of neurons, and the r is the goodness of fit. And you can see that as you add neurons, the quality of the model improves. This tells us that neurons and their spike trains carry information about things. Here it asymptotes fairly quickly. That's because what they were fitting here was just 2D cursor control, which has simple dynamics. And if you have tasks that are more complicated, then you need more neurons. So the classic definition of information is a difference that makes a difference. It's just some piece of information or knowledge that tells you something. It's like a very abstract concept, but it's such, like information theory is such a deep rabbit hole. If you haven't seen it before, the original paper, Mathematical Theory of Communication, is like, it's very readable. I highly recommend it. You'll start seeing information everywhere. It will totally change the way you view the world because the world is information, as we've talked about before. And understanding information also gets this question of, well, why do you have to have an implantable device? Why don't you have EEG or a wearable or an optical thing? And the answer, of course, is like, well, these are different information carriers, and what information are they carrying? And we know that, like, if you open a back issue of the Journal of Neuroscience and you want to understand how some species of bird encode sound localization or something, you'll find a discussion of spikes. And we, as far as we know, everything that we care about is found in the statistics of spikes. So that's what we focus on. There are other things like fMRI or EEG. These are different information carriers carrying different information, which we believe is impoverished relative to spikes. I think that's the scientific consensus. And so the question for all these different things is, well, what information is found in your carrier? We focus on spikes. That means we have to be inside the brain because there's no ceiling that we're aware of on that with respect to that like grand vision of your perception, your thoughts, everything, like motor output, re-embodying lost limbs. And so why does that mean that you have to be inside the brain? So you want spikes. Well, people have studied, if you take a neuron and you put an electrode on that specific neuron, so you have a ground truth electrical potential of that one neuron, and then you place an extracellular electrode nearby, which is what our electrodes in the Utah array and other people are like. We're not in the cell, we're near the cells. And then you measure how far away from a neuron can you be when you know what the ground truth spiking activity is, can you no longer see the spikes? And it turns out that the answer is about 60 microns, which is like 0.06. It's very small. It's a lot less than a millimeter. So you have to be firmly under the skull. Like there's no wearable that is going to get you spikes. This is a physics constraint as far as we're aware. And so now I just want to talk about briefly that Neuralink didn't come out of nowhere. There's a long academic heritage of research here. The cochlear implant has reached millions of patients since the 50s for deaf patients. Over 100,000 patients have received deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's and essential tremor and dystonia and now other indications. And about 20 patients have received the Utah array, which is a little 100 electrode rigid metal silicon device. And even though it has very few channels, they've been able to do some really cool stuff with it. There's videos on YouTube of brain gate patients doing things like controlling tablet computers or even texting each other through Utah arrays just from the small number of electrodes. And so many of the people on the team at Neuralink came from this academic work. I got my start working in a lab at Duke University studying how mappings between brain and like the screen space change. So if you make it so that the joystick goes, like the cursor goes sideways when you push forward instead of up, like how does the brain change that representation? So the point is that there are lots of people that have been looking at this problem from lots of angles for decades, and we're in the greatest sense building on the shoulders of giants here. And so the question is, why not use one of those devices? Why not use a Utah array or a deep brain stimulator implanted pulse generator? And in the Utah array case, the rigid sharp metal electrodes produce a fairly strong immune response. And this doesn't end up hurting the patient, but it does mean that you lose the ability to record single spikes over some period of time, usually between 1 and a couple years. There's also a big percutaneous connector through the scalp. So you need to plug in big external electronics, and you're never really confident that the risk of infection is gone for the duration that you have the implant. Deep brain stimulators solve a very different type of problem. They are very effective for some Parkinson's patients, but they have only a couple electrodes, and they're really geared towards injecting large amounts of current, not recording single spikes. So they're really a very different, the DBS is really just a very different type of platform for a very different type of problem. So we had to go back to the drawing board and start over build something that met the goals that Elon laid out for us. We knew, as Elon mentioned, that whatever we built, we wanted it to be completely wireless. We didn't want any connectors or wires coming through the skin. It had to be something that would last for a long period of time, not something that you'd have to take out at 2, 3, or 4 years in. It had to have practical bandwidth. So we talk about high bandwidth or ultra high bandwidth. Like, what matters is that for the task that you're after, there is practical bandwidth that allows you to effectively do that thing, whether that's cursor control or typing or robotic arm or maybe in the future vision. And it has to be usable at home. It can't be something that you go into a clinic at the hospital for 2 hours a week and under tight supervision of technicians plug you into the amplifiers and turn it on. It has to be something that you can live with. And so 2.5 years ago, we were nowhere close to any of that. This is a photo of some of the prototypes that we've gone through over that time. So we started on the far left. That's an entirely passive board that has 64 electrodes on it and connects to connectors that go to big external amplifiers. And then we added integrated electronics with our first custom chip. That's also 64 channels. And then there was a big leap to the device that Elon showed a photo of earlier. That has 3,072 electrodes in a fully implantable package with just a USB-C port coming out. And then we took a step back in channel count, because remember we have to optimize safety, longevity, and bandwidth all together. And so in order to optimize some of those other things, we moved to an easier to manufacture system that has 1536 channels and a USB-C port. And those last two are the focus of the paper that we released today. And so we've learned a lot from these. We've recorded a lot of data through these. Like, these are actually used every day at Neuralink to record neural data and work with it. And they taught us a lot about the architecture that we think was the basis for our first human product that we're calling N1. And the central component of that is the N1 sensor. It's a little hermetic package. When it's fully assembled, this is missing an outer mold. It's into an 8mm diameter, 4mm tall cylinder. And each of these has 1024 electrodes, and we can stim and record through every one of those channels. Opening it up a little bit, you can see there's the thin film, which has the threads that Elon talked about, which is the wisp going off to the side. There's a hermetic substrate, and then that gets welded later to a package that goes over top, and that's mated to our custom electronics. And we'll go into more detail. We'll have the technical leaders that work on each of these talk about these in more detail over the rest of this presentation. So yeah, I mean, this is just not to belabor the point. I know that Elon really hammered this in, but these things are very, very small. They're not. You can't manipulate these. This is one photo. This is not two photos joined together, and you really can't manipulate these with your hand. That part at the top is just a backing material that's surgical packaging. They're peeled off. The threads are peeled off that one at a time by the robot to place into the brain. And we had to build a surgical robot. And the first impetus for this is just you have to place these threads. You can't manipulate these threads. You need a robot. And then that grew into understanding where the blood vessels are and imaging into the tissue, and the surface of the brain moves because you're breathing and you have a heartbeat, and there's lots of complexity of dealing with this incredibly high entropy substrate. And it's not all offloaded to the robot. It's the robot's under the supervision of a human neurosurgeon who lays out where the threads are placed, but it would not be, the surgery is not possible without the robot. And so the N1 implant, we can place, as Elon mentioned, many of these, possibly up to 10. In one hemisphere, for our first patients, we're looking at four sensors, 3 in motor areas and 1 in a somatosensory area, which are connected via very small wires tunneled under the scalp to an inductive coil behind the ear. And that connects wirelessly through the skin to a wearable device that we call the Link, which contains a Bluetooth radio and a battery. And this is, importantly, the only battery and radio in the implant. So if you take this off, the implant shuts off. And if there's software upgrades or security issues, it's much easier to upgrade the firmware on the pod than it is to try and change the implant. It'll be controlled through an iPhone app. You won't have to go to a doctor's office and have them have an exotic programmer to configure it. And the first thing that you'll have to do is learn to use it. Like, imagine if you've never had arms, and then suddenly you have an arm, and you have to pick up a glass on the table. It's like not a cognitive task. You just how do you can't think your way through that. And so it's kind of a trippy experience at the beginning, where like patients, at first it just kind of wanders around, and then they figure out how to break the symmetry, and they learn how to control it. And that's like it's a long process. It's like learning to touch type or play piano. And so for the first product, we're really focusing on 3 distinct types of control. The first is giving patients the ability to control their mobile device, because we heard from over and over again from patient groups that if you have to have a caretaker around to press buttons for you, what's the point? You might as well have them do the thing. You have to get self-sufficient using the devices on your own. And then redirect the output from your phone to a keyboard or a mouse on a normal computer. It'll just show up as a Bluetooth mouse or a Bluetooth keyboard, like any keyboard or mouse that you can use on any computer. And as Elon mentioned, this is a forward-looking statement. There's a whole FDA process we have to go through. We haven't done that yet. This is like, these are aspirations. But we are working as hard as we can towards our first in-human clinical study next year. And again, these are plans, but the primary indication for that will be complete paralysis by upper cervical spinal cord injury. And we're expecting that those patients will get 4 1024 channel sensors, 1 each in primary motor cortex, supplementary motor area, and dorsal premotor cortex, which are 2 motor planning areas, and closed loop feedback into primary somatosensory cortex, which is like when you type or walk or pick up a pen, those aren't visually guided movements. Your body has all these senses of where it is in space and pressure and temperature and lots of other feedback. And we think for really high fluent control, you have to provide that back to the brain for the synthetic effectors also. And of course, fully wireless and able to use it at home. We think that there's a huge difference between something that you get to use 2 hours a week at the hospital versus something that you're living with every day and your brain is adapting to as much as the device is adapting to your brain. And so to bring up the other colleagues, this team is like, I'm incredibly lucky to get to work with this team. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on, we think that decoupling implantation from the electrodes is incredibly important. The reason that you have these issues where things like these like tungsten microwires get rejected is they're stiff and they're stiff and sharp and they tear the brain, and they have to be because they have to get into the brain. And so if you can decouple the process of getting it into the brain from what is left there, where it can be much softer and have material properties like the brain and maybe be coated in things that help the brain recognize it as itself, that's really important. And then the thin film polymer leads, the threads themselves, are really cool material science, and we'll go into more detail on that. And then we'll also talk more about the chips, and then a little bit more on just the neuroscience of how information is represented in firing statistics in your brain. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Matthew McDougall.
Thanks, Max. I'm Dr. Matthew McDougall. I'm head neurosurgeon at Neuralink. When I'm not at Neuralink, I'm a brain and spine surgeon here in San Francisco at CPMC, California Pacific Medical Center. Before that, I was at Stanford, where I worked in labs that implanted and designed advanced brain-computer interfaces. I originally became a neurosurgeon because I wanted to help people live happier, healthier, longer lives. I've been humbled in practice by how powerless we are to treat many of the most debilitating neurologic diseases. People afflicted with spinal cord injury, schizophrenia, autism, and a host of other neurologic conditions have far too few options. I work with Neuralink because we, for the first time in history, have the potential to solve some of these problems. Before we get to how we get the device in, we have to talk about our guiding principle at Neuralink. It's safety. Everything we do at Neuralink is filtered through the question, will this make me more likely to want to get one? Will it make me more likely to recommend this to my family and friends? This approach impacts every design decision we make. So while for the immediate future, Neuralink's devices will only be intended for patients with serious, unmet medical needs, our design philosophy is that this should be safe enough that it can be an elective procedure. So what have we done to try to make it safe? For starters, we've created very small threads. They displace a lot less tissue than the traditional methods. In my regular practice today, I routinely implant large, deep brain stimulator electrodes into the brains of my patients. They're big enough to have about a 1 in 100 chance of causing a significant hemorrhage. They displace and disrupt enough brain tissue that you can often see neurologic consequences just from placing the wire. We can do better than that. Neuralink's threads are so thin that they're difficult to see with the naked eye. They're much smaller than the width of a human hair. They're small enough that a human surgeon can't actually implant them without help. So we created help. Neuralink developed a tool that we're extremely proud of, the robotic inserter. Inspired by designs conceived of in labs here in the Bay at UCSF and Berkeley, we developed this robot that can rapidly and precisely insert hundreds of individual threads representing thousands of distinct electrodes into the cortex in less than an hour. This tool allows a surgeon to aim between the blood vessels that cover the surface of the brain with micron scale precision. The region of the brain shown in this video represents only a few millimeters of surface of the brain. As you can see, the brain's surface moves with the heartbeat and breathing. The robot tracks and adjusts for this movement. Using this tool, we can greatly reduce the risk of harming cortical vessels and causing bleeding. Here, the robot is selecting individual electrode threads and placing them into the brain in the pre-planned location with remarkable accuracy and repeatability. Using this system, we've been able to rapidly place thousands of electrodes into the cortex without causing noticeable bleeding. We also have an in-house histology team that examines brain tissue to help us choose electrode profiles and materials to help us minimize tissue damage. When you think of traditional neurosurgery, you probably think of something very invasive. Traditional surgery on the brain isn't something that patients ever look forward to or are excited about, except in the most dire circumstances. Usually a clamp is attached to the skull to keep it rigidly immobilized to the operating table. We often shave all or most of the patient's hair. Patients can end up with large visible scars. At Neuralink, we want to create an entirely different patient experience, something more like LASIK. No scars, no big scars, no hospital stays, no short procedures, no hospital stays, very short procedures, and of course, in the end, you get to keep all your hair. We even want this to be possible under conscious sedation. That means you can get rid of the complexity and the risk of general anesthesia, as well as many of the unpleasant side effects, nausea, sore throat from a breathing tube. To be absolutely clear, our first clinical trial patients are going to receive an experience much more like traditional neurosurgery. But our aim is to simplify the procedure, down to the injection of local anesthetic, a very small opening in the skin, a painless opening in the skull below, quick and precise placement of threads into the cortex, and then we fill that hole in the skull with the sensor, allowing the scalp to be closed up over it. Behind the ear, we'll make a small incision to insert the coil. We will tunnel tiny wires under the scalp to connect the sensors to the coil. That's the process. I believe that Neuralink is going to be able to provide us in the medical community with a platform that can finally enable us to treat some of these very difficult to treat diseases, also to understand them better. I hope you find this as exciting as I find it. If you feel you might be able to help us, don't hesitate to contact us. To talk more about the technology behind all this, I'd like to introduce Vanessa Tolosa, director of our Neural Interfaces group.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Tolosa. I lead the Neural Interface group at Neuralink. Our team consists of engineers and material scientists who are responsible for making the probes that get implanted into tissue, the packaging for the electronics, and integrating these two components together. We also do all the testing and characterization of these parts. Before joining Neuralink, I led a neurotech team at Lawrence Livermore National Lab. There we worked on a wide range of neuroprosthetic technologies that were used both in the academic and clinical settings. I decided to join Neuralink because I saw an opportunity to take all of this exciting work that we were seeing in neurotech research and actually make them accessible to patients at a much faster time rate than what medical device companies have traditionally been able to do. With that in mind, at Neuralink, we set out to create a fully implantable neural interface with thousands of channels that are capable of single spike resolution. This device must last a long time in the body. To do this, it must be small, flexible, and made of biocompatible materials that will minimize the brain's immune response. To protect the electronics from the caustic environment of the body, it must have airtight packaging, also known as hermetic packaging. The device must also be able to both record from and stimulate neurons. This is essential for a highly functioning BMI. Finally, the manufacturing process must be scalable and capable of making micrometer-sized features consistently. Currently, there are no research or commercial devices that meet all of our requirements. So we built one out of microfabricated thin film polymers. Just like in semiconductor chip manufacturing, we use a layer-by-layer process that generally consists of 3 repeating steps. We're either always depositing material, patterning a material through photolithography, or etching away a material. Depending on the complexity of the design, these steps could be repeated over 100 times. And to make things more challenging, we are limited to materials that are safe for the body. In our current design, we have a 3-metal layer process that results in a 5-micron thick and 10 to 40 micron wide probe. To give you an idea of how small this is, red blood cells have a diameter of about 8 microns. And an average strand of hair is about 100 microns. Yet in this small footprint, we're able to fit our electrodes, our wires, and the insulation for each of those wires. With microfabrication, we can drive features down to the size of an electron beam. So this is great because we want to make our probes as small as possible. Essentially, we want it to be invisible to the brain. But there are other factors that limit the size of our probes. For example, as we make the wires smaller, it increases the resistance of those wires. And as the resistance increases, it makes it more difficult for us to separate our signals from our noise. Similarly, there are other technical challenges and trade-offs that are related to higher channel counts and manufacturing yield, electrode size, and material and tissue safety. At Neuralink, we have an incredible team that's been tackling these challenges and have been able to make high channel count polymer probes. And this image is a silicon wafer that holds 10 of these arrays, these polymer arrays. In this design, each of those arrays has over 3,000 channels. So what that means is in this one wafer, we've manufactured over 30,000 electrodes and over 30,000 insulated wires. This is something that can't be done with the way current medical devices are being made. That rainbow effect is caused by the small feature sizes on these devices that are interacting with the nanometer size wavelengths of light that are reflecting off of them. If you were to zoom in on the ends of one of these arrays, you'll see this region where we put all of our electrodes. So each of these vertical filaments that end in a loop is what we refer to as a thread. And each of these threads can be placed independently into the brain using our robot during surgery. This design is called Linear Edge. It's one of over 20 designs that we've made for our R&D work. We've progressively been increasing the number of electrodes per thread without significantly increasing the width of each of these threads at the base. We've been able to do this by adding layers and reducing the sizes of the wires down to as small as 350 nanometers. This is less than the wavelength of visible light. Because we're using a lithographic process, essentially if we can draw it, we can also make it. So on one end of our probes are the electrodes. On the other end are where we connect the probes to the electronic package, or to the electronics through conductive feed-throughs. This substrate is part of the hermetic electronics package. Standard methods of connecting the probes to the electronics package usually involve some kind of large plug-in type connector or a polymer-based glue that bonds the two components together. But as we increase density and decrease the footprint, it becomes impossible to achieve hermeticity in standard medical device connectors. This is due to several reasons. One of them is how these substrates are currently manufactured. Hermetic feed-throughs consist of holes that have been packed with conductive materials and are embedded in an insulating substrate. As you drill more holes and pack them more tightly together, these brittle substrates, typically made of ceramics, become more susceptible to cracking. Also, as you make the holes smaller, it becomes more difficult to fill them with this conductive material without getting non-hermetic voids. Standard processing also requires exposure to high temperatures, typically over 700 degrees Celsius. At these high temperatures, the coefficient of thermal expansion, or CTE mismatch, between the insulator and the conductor can cause circumferential cracking or interfacial gaps during the cooling phase. We're able to get around these problems by developing a new process. So rather than making the probes and then the substrates and then connecting them together, instead we microfabricate them together into one monolithic component. This provides a tight seal at densities that current methods with standard materials for medical devices can't achieve. So far, we've used this process to make a hermetic thin film substrate with over 1,000 connections over a 2.4 millimeter by 2.4 millimeter footprint. Next, we assemble the electronics and then also attach a wired lid using a laser welding process. These two steps have required a lot of internal development as well. The result is the sensor that's ready for final assembly and implants into the body. Next, you'll hear from my colleague DJ about our custom electronics.
Thank you, Vanessa. My name is DJ Saw, and I'm the Director of Implant Systems at Neuralink. My team focuses on building chips and systems to get neural signals recorded from our electrodes out of the brain, and also to put information into the brain. Before Neuralink, I was at UC Berkeley, where I co-invented NeuralDust, which is a technology to power and communicate with small implantable systems using ultrasound waves. Typical chip lifecycle from design to verification to tape out is approximately 1 to several years. At Neuralink, we had the ability to co-design our chip with the rest of the system, and the tight feedback loop from this organization has enabled our small team of analog and digital chip designers to tape out a new design every 3 months on average. That means over the past 24 months, we've done 8 tape outs in total, representing 15 different chips that have been designed, fabricated, tested, and used in development. The artwork that you see on the top of the slide is of some of the actual chips that we've made so far. For any custom chips we make, the architecture can vary substantially, but the basic ideas are the same. Neural signals recorded from the electrode typically look like the one on the slide. And in order for us to extract the information that we care about, we need to first amplify, filter, and digitize those neural signals, and use digital logic to process and send out the bits we want for BMI. We also need ways to diagnose any issues with our electrodes and be able to drive stimulation engine to inject charge to the brain when required. Our latest chip is called N1 System on Chip, and it is physically small, measuring only 20 millimeter squares or 4 by 5 millimeters. It is low power, highly configurable, and it has 1,024 simultaneous record and stimulation capable channels. And it has on-chip spike detection. To dive deeper into N1 SoC, I'd like to highlight 3 key innovations, and they are 1, analog pixel, 2, on-chip spike detection, and 3, stimulation on every channel. The first is analog pixel. Before we can convert analog neural signals into digital bits, we need to amplify and filter them. And this is where the analog pixel comes in. we want to have one analog pixel per electrode so that we can configure them independently. So in the case of N1 SoC, there are 1,024 analog pixels. Analog pixels also take up a significant portion of the physical space on the chip, and how well they work determines both the signal quality and the characteristics of the overall neural interface. The goal of analog pixel design is to make it as small as possible so we can fit more, as low power as possible so we generate less heat and have longer battery run times, and as low noise as possible so we get the best signals. Now, the challenge here is that these goals are at odds with each other. For example, we want to achieve lower noise on the amplifier so that more spikes can be detected. But as transistors get smaller, it becomes harder to get lower noise while keeping the power the same or less. Since the start of Neuralink, we've gone through 3 major revisions to the analog pixel, progressively improving both the size and power while maintaining performance. Over the past 24 months, we had 7-fold improvements in the size of the analog pixel, and our latest pixel on the right is at least 5 times smaller than the known state-of-the-art of similar architecture with 1 pixel dedicated per electrode, as published in the academic literature. Second innovation is on-chip spike detection. Once the signals are amplified, they're converted and digitized to zeros and ones by our on-chip analog-to-digital converters. As you'll hear in a second, spikes or action potentials shown on this slide are often critical for certain BMI tasks. Currently, there are several different methods for detecting spikes, such as thresholding, or more sophisticated methods such as principal component analysis. At Neuralink, one of the robust ways that we came up with is by directly characterizing the shape. And it's worth noting that this is different than template matching in that it gives us more information in a general way. In certain cases, we can actually identify different neurons from the same electrode based on their shapes. Our analog pixel can capture the entire neural signals sampled at 20,000 samples per second with 10 bits of resolution, resulting in over 200 megabits per second of neural data for each 1,024 channels that we record. In our previous systems that you heard about, we were able to stream this entire broadband signals through a single USB-C connector and cable, and we performed real-time spike detection on an 8-core machine running our optimized C code. Now, we wanted to completely eliminate connectors and cables for N1, so we had to modify our algorithms to fit into the hardware by scaling both, making it both scalable and also low power. And then we were able to also implement this algorithm in our N1 SoC. Our algorithms can compress neural data by more than 200 times, and it only takes 900 nanoseconds to compute, which is faster than the time it takes for the brain to realize it happened. Finally, it was important for us to enable stimulation from every channel that we can record from and make it configurable and high resolution. To make this work, we custom designed stimulation engine for electrical stimulation that can coexist alongside our analog pixels. Our stimulation engine has 0.2 microamp of amplitude resolution and 7.8 microsecond of time resolution. There is a 16:1 ratio of electrode to stimulation engine, so we can't stimulate every channel simultaneously, but we can within each stim pulse, usually in milliseconds, and we can also stimulate any combination of 64 channels at the same time. So in summary, looking through our N1 SoC, it has 1,024 analog pixels that we can record from simultaneously with 7.2 microvolt RMS noise while only consuming 6.6 microwatt of power. It has on-chip analog to digital converters, on-chip spike detection that can compress neural data more than 200 times, and it only takes 900 nanoseconds to compute. Stimulation engine with 0.2 microamp of amplitude and 7.8 microsecond of time resolution. And finally, diagnostics for electrode and impedance measurement. All of these functionalities that I outlined are integrated into a single 4x5 millimeter silicon die. Next, my colleague Flip will tell you more about what can be done with these signals.
Thanks, DJ. My name is Philip Sabis, and I'm the senior scientist at Neuralink. Before Neuralink, I was at UCSF, where I was a professor of physiology. There, for 16 years, I ran a lab that studied how the brain processes sensory and motor signals. We developed new neurotechnologies, and we studied how to take those tools and use them for neural engineering applications. Today, I'm going to tell you about how it is that we can use those amazing devices that Vanessa and DJ just told you about to communicate with the brain. Now, specifically, I want to tell you about two things. First, I want to show you that the work that we're doing doesn't come out of thin air. We're building on over a century of neuroscience research and decades of neural engineering research. These provide a solid foundation for the sorts of things that we're talking about. Second, I want to show you why we believe that even more advanced applications are possible with more advanced devices. Now, when Elon contacted me over 2.5 years ago now, and told me about his vision for the company, I knew that I wanted to join for these two reasons. Because I knew that the technology was at a point where, with the right team and the right vision, and a long-term vision, we could do the sorts of things that we're talking about. And I knew that with that team, we could do things that no one had even dreamed about yet. Okay. So the first thing I want to show you is a video. Many of you who are seeing this have seen videos like this before, so you know what it is. But if you don't know what this is, I have the distinct pleasure of telling you that right now what you're looking at is the brain at work. This is, in fact, traces of a bunch of electrodes that came off of one of our devices, a bunch of electrodes from a single thread. And each trace shows you a voltage waveform in time as it's coming off of one of those threads. Now, if we focus in on one of those traces, the first thing you may notice is that there are these big voltage deflections that happen periodically, and these are the spikes that Max and Elon and others have talked about. These spikes occur, again, when a neuron has an action potential. And this is the fundamental element of communication within the brain, and this is the thing that we want to tap into. This is what we want to be able to record. Now, as DJ just told you, we have algorithms that can detect these spikes in real time as they're happening. And that allows us to collect data that looks something like this. This is what we call a spike raster. So each row there represents one channel of recording, and time goes from left to right. And each of those little tick marks is the time of a single spike in action potential. All right, so presumably there's some information somewhere in there. How do we get at it? What are we going to do with it? Well, for the first application, which Max told you about, which is allowing paralyzed individuals to be able to control a computer, what we want to do is we want to reach into primary motor cortex and record the activity that's happening there. Primary motor cortex is the part of the brain that sends signals down the spinal cord and to the muscles to drive movement. Of course, it does that with action potentials. And in particular, we want to record from the hand and arm portions of primary motor cortex. So imagine that you have a person sitting holding a mouse, and they're sitting still, and then they make an outward movement with their mouse, and then they reach back. What would you see in the brain? Well, here's a synthetic neuron. I made these data up, but it gives you the idea. Here's a synthetic neuron that shows that in the background activity, when the person's at rest, maybe there's some firing. But when that person reaches outward, that neuron starts to fire a lot. And when he reaches back, the neuron becomes quiet. So this is what we call a neuron that's tuned to a particular direction of movement. Now, maybe we'll record from another neuron, and this neuron may have a different pattern. It may be tuned to the return movement and not to the outward movement, so it fires more on the return. What if we ask the person to do that movement again? What we would see is a similar pattern of activation. So the neuron on top still fires more for outward movement, and the neuron on the bottom still fires more for the return movement. But you'll notice that the patterns are different. And that's because neural activity in the brain is random. It has stochasticity. Which means that even though the person may be intending to do the exact same thing from one movement to the next, the neural code, the neural representation at the level of an individual neuron is noisy. And this is just one of the reasons why we need to record from lots of neurons in order to be able to gain a high fidelity readout of what the intention is. So let's say we record from a bunch of neurons. It might look something like this. Now, if you look at that, you might think that looks pretty messy and it's not clear what's going on. But I'm going to do a little trick. I'm going to take those neurons and I'm going to rearrange them so that they're in the order of the tuning that they have, just as I told you about those two neurons. And if you do that, look what happens. Now suddenly structure emerges. And I think you'll agree, looking at that there's information in that stack of neurons that tells you about the movement. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want to do that kind of magic in an automated way to read out the movement. The way we do that is by building something that we call decoding algorithms. These are mathematical algorithms that we tune based on data like these to be able to take in just those rasters of spiking activity and output the movement that the person wants to make. Okay, so for these little fake data, I built a very, very simple decoder, and sure enough, it's able to capture the intended movement. This is what we want to do on a bigger scale. Now, you might say to yourself, I don't understand, you're talking about moving, but I thought it was about paralyzed people, right? So how does that work? Well, it turns out we know from a lot of prior research that even if you're not actually making the movement, even if you're just thinking about the movement, or even if you're watching someone else make movement, the cells in motor cortex respond in a similar way. So we can build up these decoding algorithms just from those kind of data. And then a paralyzed person can think about moving the mouse, and the cursor will move. Now, this kind of decoding has been done in a fair number of academic labs, including my own before I came here, and in humans in academic studies. What we want, what Neuralink's goal, though, is to be able to do this with a clinical device that people can take home and use on their own, and that has orders of magnitude more channels, orders of magnitude more neurons that we're recording from. With that, we think that people will be able to get naturalistic control over their computers, not just a mouse, but also a keyboard, game controllers, and potentially other devices. That's what we're trying to do. Now, I've told you about the arm and hand area of motor cortex, but the devices that we're talking about, because of their high bandwidth and the ability to tailor the location of each individual electrode to a person's individualized cortical anatomy, we should be able to reach anywhere in motor cortex. So, for example, there are areas at the base of motor cortex that are responsible for driving activation of the speech articulators. There was a recent lovely study from UCSF that showed that from activity like that, you can actually decode speech. So you can decode the movement of the articulators, and from that, you can create synthetic speech. So potentially, with a device like this, you could restore speech to a paralyzed person who's no longer able to talk. But there's no reason in principle that we can't reach all of motor cortex. And that would give us access to any movement that a person thinks about, any movement at all. A person could imagine running or dancing or even kung fu, and we would be able to decode that signal. So that could give a paralyzed person the ability to control, say, for example, a 3D avatar that they could use for online gaming or sports. It could allow them to control a wide range of assistive robotic devices. And ultimately, if and when the technology for spinal cord, nerve, or muscle stimulation gets far enough, ultimately, it could be used to restore that individual's control of their own body. Okay. I've talked about readout, but remember we want bidirectional information. We don't only want to read information out of the brain, we want to be able to put it back into the brain. Now to some of you that may seem a little bit fantastical that you could write information into the brain, but actually the basic building blocks of that technology are already there. This is the same image that you saw before of an electrode next to a cell. It turns out if you pass a tiny amount of current through that electrode, what happens is that you activate cells nearby. You cause them to fire an action potential, one or many. And that is the technology that is already being used widely outside the brain, say, for example, for cochlear implants, which have been used for decades to restore hearing to the deaf, and more recently in the eye to restore vision to the blind in a fairly rudimentary way, as I'll tell you more later. But in addition, you can use this same technology in the brain, for example, to restore the sense of touch or to restore vision. And I'm going to tell you very briefly about those two applications. So let's start with the sense of touch. Consider this little bit of tissue of brain that I've just highlighted here that's at the border between motor and somatosensory cortex. So if we blow that up, what you can see is that somatosensory cortex has a very special property. It has what we refer to as a spatial map. And what I mean by that is that there are regions that encode the palm of the hand and each of the 5 digits, for example. So if we were to stimulate at one little location, say in the thumb part of the cortex, the person would feel a sense of touch or pressure on their thumb. Or if we were to stimulate 2 sites in the palm area of cortex, you might feel a couple of points or touches on your hand. This kind of technology has been demonstrated in many academic labs. And in a recent really nice paper, it was shown that with subjects controlling a robot arm through BMI, getting tactile feedback of when that arm or when the hand of that arm was grasping an object improved the ability to pick up and place objects with the robot. So this is the kind of thing that can really help decoding. So imagine what we could do if we were able to take our device and cover all of somatosensory cortex. We could give rich sensation of objects, of haptic feedback when you're manipulating objects. We could maybe feel different textures. But it's not just about improving the user experience. It's also about getting to the level of functionality that we want. Imagine for a second, imagine typing. Now imagine typing with your fingers anesthetized. That's going to be pretty hard. So that haptic feedback, that sense of sensory feedback during movement is going to be important going forward. And yeah, okay. So that sensory feedback for the hand, we can also potentially provide visual feedback. So visual cortex, just like somatosensory cortex, has maps. So there's a spatial map in visual cortex, which is here in orange in the back of the brain. So for example, if we stimulate a particular point in cortex, we might see a flash of light in a little punctate spot in front of us. And this was demonstrated many years ago by neurosurgeons, and it's been used in academic labs, and that we call that little dot a phosphene. And if you stimulate another area, you'll get a phosphene in a different location. So the idea here is that you could stimulate a bunch of different areas, and you could create kind of like a dot matrix image of the visual world, which could provide a rudimentary form of vision. And there are academic labs and even companies that are working on technology just like this. But there isn't just one map in visual cortex. Actually, there are a bunch of different maps. This is a good example of how the brain works. There's a spatial map, but there are also maps telling you about the orientation of edges in the field. There are maps telling you about color. There are maps telling you about the size and speed of objects moving. So what we want is a device that has sensors that are small enough, electrodes that are small enough, and a high enough density that we can tap into that rich collection of maps with our stimulation devices so that we can do better than just dot matrix, so that we can actually create rich visual feedback for the blind. That's the long-term goal. Okay, that's just, again, one more example of the way that these devices can be used. So I've talked about recording signals, and I've talked about stimulating. You can combine those two to treat a variety of neurological disorders. Max talked earlier about deep brain stimulation to treat, say, for example, Parkinson's disease. And many people have those devices in. Academic labs have recently shown that you can do better with stimulation, you can treat better, if you also are able to record the state of the brain, say from motor cortex, and use that to shape the pattern of stimulation. Deep brain stimulation, or DBS, has also been used for dystonia. It is already approved for dystonia and obsessive compulsive disorder. And we think, again, closed-loop therapies can do better. And in fact, for epilepsy, there's already a commercial product that does this kind of closed-loop seizure detection and disruption, although it does it with only about 8 electrodes. There are many other diseases. Oh, no. All right. We'll get there. Sorry. There are a number of other neurological disorders where DBS has promise, but is still an investigational stage, like depression, chronic pain, tinnitus. Now, even though these diseases are currently being treated with these big DBS electrodes like you've seen, we think that there's a potential here for the kinds of devices we're designing to get individualized, highly focused treatment that will reach broader patient populations and be able to be more effective in the way that they treat these disorders. All right, lastly, I want to tell you about not just sensory input and motor output, but about thought. So there are parts of the brain where we know that there's neural activity that encodes the things that you're thinking about. And one great example is an area called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is involved in memory formation, and it helps store episodic memory, things that you remember from your life. It also has a particular kind of memory for locations and views that you know. For example, it'll have cells that represent places in your own home or in a city that you know well. So imagine that you could record from a collection of neurons in the hippocampus of somebody who lived in San Francisco and knew it well. Then it's likely that they would have some neurons there in the hippocampus that represent various locations in Golden Gate Park. And so if that person were to take a car ride, for example, from the ocean through the park, you would see those neurons fire in order as they took that ride. First, a neuron that maybe represents a view of the ocean, and then the bison in their paddock, and so on. All right. So I've told you about the way that the brain represents information, and that these sorts of encoding methods, representations in the brain, are things that we can learn to decode. And I've told you about some of the applications and how they might work. As the device technology gets better and better, and as we get more and more experience with those devices, we and other researchers will be able to bootstrap off of those advances to reach other brain areas and other applications. That's what we're trying to do. Neuralink's goal is, neuroscience has shown that a wide variety of information content is readily available in the brain. We know, for example, that there are signals that encode speech and language. There are signals that encode your mood. There are signals that encode the sense of pain, when you're hungry and when you're thirsty. There are signals that encode your memories, and even esoteric things like mathematical reasoning. What Neuralink wants to do is to give people the ability to tap into those representations, to get better access to that information, both to repair broken brain circuits and also to ultimately give us better access to better connections to the world, to each other, and to ourselves. Thank you.
All right, thanks. We're going to take a risk here and just do some Q&A. That hopefully was a good understanding of the brain. Yeah, nice work, guys. It's like, that's very proud of the Neuralink team. They've done amazing work, and yeah, it's a really smart group. There's a lot more there's a lot more really smart people. So what you're seeing here is the outcome of a lot of hard work by the Neuralink team, yeah, I think there's some pretty impressive stuff. So we can take some more questions from the audience. The lights are bright, so you might have to just take you later or something.
Yeah. Is there a roadmap towards allowing people or organizations to actually push custom code to these devices?
This is a really interesting question. So it's definitely too early to really think about this. Elon,
I think we'll hold up on the custom code immediately. Yeah. But I think it's conceivably there could be some kind of app store thing in the future, or some sort of platform with like a very rigorous verification of the application. Yeah. But yeah, I think that this is certainly not meant to be sort of a closed system. Ultimately, if we can enable others to contribute, whether they're at Neuralink or not, that would be a good thing, for sure.
And just add one more thing to this. We've had some discussions, like it might be that if you want to build an app or a business on top of a brain-enabled API, then your business model can't be advertising, for example. It's very important to us that this is that this turns out well for everyone, and so there's thinking like that going on.
Yeah. Sure.
Does the brain's neuroplasticity make this harder or easier for you guys? Like, are you trying to interpret a continually moving target, or is there a chance for a symbiosis once the brain realizes what's happening to it?
Yeah, there's no doubt that plasticity will make things.
Repeat the question.
So the question was whether neuroplasticity will help or hurt our effort, and I think there's no doubt that it will help. First of all, there's just the fact that you have to learn how to use these devices. But for example, in work that we did in my lab earlier, we showed that you can write in information that isn't perfect. It doesn't get that map perfect. Or even it can be somewhat quite different from the map. But ultimately, you can learn to use that through plasticity. And there's going to be a lot of learning required, and the ability of the brain to adapt to new information, and in particular, the ability of the brain to take information that comes from multiple sources and merge it in an effective way is, I think, the kind of thing that really will facilitate complex new tasks with these devices.
I mean, it stands to reason that the neurons are responding to electrical pulses. So the electrode is providing electrical pulses, to the neuron, an electrical pulse is a neuron. It just thinks it's a neuron, and it's going to, for sure, adapt dynamically because it just sees electrical pulses, and it's going to respond to those. Yeah. So, yeah.
So there's no advertising.
I mean, Jesus. I mean, you'd have really no escape. We cannot do that. That would be an ethical barrier. Yeah, so the question is, if this will not be advertising driven, which I think would be unwise, then how will it be paid for, essentially? Is that correct? Or how will we ensure that it's broadly available? Yeah. I think that the cost of these brain disease or brain injuries is extremely high to society. If you have to take care of somebody, or if they need comprehensive medical care or hospice, this is actually very, very costly to society. So I think the economics of solving for that make a ton of sense. And if you enable somebody to work and be productive, contribute to the economy, I think that will. I think that the economics of that will easily pay for itself. And then in the limit, of course, if you want to be symbiotic with AI, it'd be like, I think it's safe to say you could repay the loan with superhuman intelligence. I think it's a safe bet. So I think the economics of this will work out. And the first order is really just to make sure that it works and works safely. And then I think it'll really be the option of the person. But it is critical that this be sort of, as we've talked about before, like a LASIK-like device. If this has to be done by a neurosurgeon, it cannot be scaled. There just aren't enough neurosurgeons. So it must be, just as one wouldn't want sort of like a hand operated laser for an ophthalmology situation. You really want the robot doing it with precision. The same thing goes for the brain interface. So, yeah. Sure. Yeah, so the question is, have we implanted the chip in animals? And if so, what are the results? So I think first it's important to say that we regard any chip implant, even if it's in a rat, as a very serious thing. Like, so we even care about rats, even though they have the Black Plague and everything, So like they arguably have some karmic payback, but nonetheless, we care about rats. So. And then we're extremely sensitive with monkeys, and we work with the University of California at Davis for any of the monkey activity. So, and the results have been very positive. Do you want to maybe talk about? I know this is a sensitive subject.
Yeah.
But I think it is. Yeah, we definitely need to address the elephant in the room, the monkey in the room.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we wish that we didn't have to work with animals, right? That we just wish that wasn't like a step in the process, but it is. It's a very important part in the research and development process to produce better outcomes for human patients and improvements in human health. And we try to be very thoughtful and we follow the 3 R's of like reduction, replacement, and refinement of laboratory animal medicine, and we try to be very careful and thoughtful about it and do it as efficiently as possible, because we believe that the benefit to humanity is in the end like the benefits outweigh the negatives.
The questioner also asked about the results, and there is a paper available, I think now, soon, that has some of the results in them.
Yeah, I mean, but we have made a monkey has been able to control the computer with its brain. Just FYI.
I didn't realize we were running that result today, but there it goes.
The monkey's going to come out of the bag, so. This is much good for point of it. Yeah. Can we speak about the FDA path that we want to pursue and how we might work with the scientific community? You guys want to talk about it?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, why don't we start with FDA?
Well, I was also going to say, like, we're under no illusion that we think we can do all of the science required for this ourselves. Like, there's an immense amount of neuroscience to be done with these devices, and there's a huge amount that we have to learn about the brain, and that's going to be a much larger thing than just Neuralink. And we want to get these tools into the hands, eventually at the right time. I think that we're still a very small company just focused on getting our first patients, and we have to be laser focused on that. But we want this to be a thing that is much larger. Like, we want this to be a field, right? We want this to really fuel advancement of the field. Because the most important thing is not that like Neuralink is this like one specific place, but that it advances all of us. And for the FDA, there's a pathway. We're pursuing an early feasibility study, IDE, and there's the FDA actually put out draft guidance in February that's very specific to the type of thing we're doing, and it's pretty prescriptive. It's a checklist of what they want to see, and there's a lot in it. You have to show that it's going to be expected to be safe and biocompatible and stable, but you work through that and you give them the documentation.
But I mean, people in academia right now are quite constrained in working with the Utah arrays. That's the most advanced thing in academia, and our system is at least 100, arguably 1,000 times. Well, on the order of 100, I suppose, relative to the potential of the Utah array, 2 orders of magnitude improvement at the experimental level. So I think it probably would make sense for us to make more of the robots and provide the chips to academia to further the science. Sure. Sorry, okay. It's hard for me to see.
So you've obviously been working under the radar for quite some time, and you've made significant advances. Now that you're public and very obviously recruiting today, and I would assume looking for additional academic partnerships to sort of accelerate your development, what is the best way for academics to get in touch with you and start to create these new collaborations and advance mutually on the side of academia and the side of Neuralink?
Sure. What is the best way for academics to get in touch with us to collaborate on furthering the field and
N1.
Yeah. What do you guys think?
So first, if anybody out there has technologies or ideas that they haven't heard us talk about today and that they think could be useful for us, they should reach out and tell us about it. We're always interested in new technology and new things that are happening in the field. So that's a first. As far as getting the academic community access to data, for example, this is something that we are committed to doing. The details of the pathway on that aren't fully worked out. There are a number of options. And to be honest, if you have ideas about ways that anyone in the academic community thinks that it would be good to engage with us, we're willing to listen. And we'll pick 1 or 2 and we will make it possible for the technology that we're working on to have a very broad impact on the field. That's definitely one of our goals.
Yeah, I mean, the things that sort of really drive the technology are, advancing the chip design, the software on chip and for interpretation of the results, material science especially for the coatings of the electrodes, like how do you have a long life electrode. It's quite a difficult thing to get that coding, get the materials right, and then the application of the materials for the something that you want to be, because you want these electrodes to last for many decades in the brain, but this is quite a difficult environment. It really wants to corrode. So getting the right coatings is incredibly difficult. It's a tough material science problem. Sure.
On that note, you pushed quite a bit on material science and informatic packaging. Do you guys have a sense of, it's only been doing it for 2 years and things are changing, but do you have a sense of the longevity? Is it outperforming, or do you consider it a solved problem compared to rigid Utah arrays?
Right. Do we consider the longevity a solved problem? Definitely not. So I think the longevity is one of the key questions, and it's difficult to say, like, until you actually have it implanted, how long does it last? And then if it does start failing, does it fail in a benign way or in a bad way? So I think there's not enough time yet to actually say whether it is going to live for a long time. It obviously makes sense to have accelerated live testing of the electrodes, so in a non-brain situation, so you figure out something that's actually a worse environment than the brain, and which is actually quite a difficult environment for a chip. And electrodes, find something that's even worse and have accelerated live testing. That's one of the key things, and then they need to confirm that in an actual brain. So. I mean, the latest results are quite promising, but it's too early to reach conclusions. I think we've just recently seen what we think is a remarkable breakthrough, but time will tell. Sure. Yeah, I can just.
I was wondering, how are you planning to avoid the mechanical mismatch between the neural probe and the brain, and that to make probes?
How will we address the mechanical mismatch of the electrodes and the brain? Essentially, because the cells are like jello and electrodes are really hard. And so you have a big stiffness difference between brain cells and the metal electrode. Yeah, do you want to ask a question?
Oh, I'm on. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason, one of the reasons why we went towards flexible materials. Like, there are a lot of different kinds of probes out there right now, if you look it up, and that's the main purpose of going flexible, and also going smaller. So, as I said, that we're really trying to make it as invisible to the brain as possible. And then on top of that, as was mentioned, coatings. So all of those combined, we're hoping to significantly decrease that immune response.
But essentially, if you have something with high modulus and something with low modulus, but if you make the high modulus thing very thin, it becomes quite flexible. Yeah. Moment of inertia. So I'll try to answer a question at the back there. It's hard for me to see behind the camera. Yeah.
So recent research from Dr. Yosher down at Baylor has shown that like a temporal delay in generated phosphines is necessary for the patient to perceive like a cohesive image. So if you stimulate the entire letter at one time, it's different from sort of drawing the letter across the visual cortex. Have you found similar things in motor cortex and sensory cortex in the recordings that you've been doing?
So I think if summarize the question, like essentially, do we look at like higher order feedback where it's sort of at the maybe whole limb level or combination of limbs or a whole word or letter as opposed to an individual phosphine or something like that? Okay.
Yeah, I think that, of course, that's a stimulation result, not a recording result. And it may have something to do with the kind of low resolution of the stimulus, that the psychophysics of that, it's hard to perceive it as a complete letter, but you get filling in of motion that helps you perceive the object. That's kind of sort of my thinking of what's going on. And so, I think these are the kinds of questions that honestly we haven't yet addressed. When I talked about visual stimulation and the kind of rich visual stimulation that we want to, just to be clear, that was aspirational. And so, come back and ask us in a little bit, and I'll answer.
Yeah, but there are, there are like individual neurons that you can trace to particular names and concepts and people, at kind of advanced long-term level, I think people would have kind of like if two people had a Neuralink, you'd be able to effectively have a sort of really high bandwidth telepathy, or actually technically going over radio waves, but you could actually communicate at a sort of complex meme structure level, using the Dawkins version of the meme. So then you could really have like potentially a new kind of communication. It's sort of a conceptual telepathy, essentially. It would also be consensual. I'll try to answer something in the back. Yeah, I can hardly see you, but anyone in the back there, basically. If you talk.
Yeah, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you guys on the technology that you've created, all the accomplishments.
Thanks. Great team.
So, I apologize for keeping this out of the tech atmosphere, but going to the philosophical realm. I'd like to know, essentially, the implications of Neuralink is to solve a lot of the problems that humans face on a day-to-day basis. In a Parkinson's, 7 to 10 million people worldwide face it. I wrote it down. So, I understand that, humans under these difficult circumstances, we find great meaning, and find meaning in life. And I wanted to know if Neuralink, if their ultimate goal is to eliminate suffering. If so, if we're given the tools to accurately understand the trials that we're faced with, how are we able to find meaning in life? I have like a crude answer.
Oh, okay. What's your answer to what do you think we should do? I mean, we're open to ideas here. The overarching objective is to make the future better, aspirationally, and to hopefully not pave the road to hell with good intentions. Whereas I think the road to hell is mostly paved with bad intentions, though.
I mean, my answer is very, very, very crude.
Okay.
But essentially, this technology has never surfaced the face of the earth, so that right now it's like looking into
big question.
Yeah, I think that it's a big philosophical question. What will, it's hard to say what the future will be with something like this brain-machine interface. I doubt that we would be able to eliminate all suffering, and it actually may be ultimately oddly dystopian if we do eliminate all suffering. That actually may not be a true utopia. There's like generally like stories about utopia tend to turn into dystopia. But I think we can definitely make a significant difference, and we can address, when I say we, I mean humanity can address a lot of the suffering that occurs in the world and make things a lot better. And I think a lot of times people are quite sort of negative about the present and about the future, but really I think if you're a student of history, when else would you really want to be alive? Now's the best time, pretty much. Yeah. It's like those who think the past is better have not read enough history. Okay, way in the back there, I see actually, you can see a hand. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about the computational backend that derives gains from these reported pulse streams? Is it like traditional compute, a bunch of GPUs, a bunch of asynchronous FPGAs? Can it run on AWS? Is it
Yeah.
Yeah, guys.
Yeah, I think that DJ should answer some of this, but
so
yeah.
no.
No.
It doesn't run on AWS.
I'll also say that you often have very tight latency constraints in this system.
Yeah, exactly.
You really have to run locally.
Yeah, so the question is, how are we doing the back-end computation? What are some of the methods that we're doing it? Yeah, so as Max just mentioned, latency is something that we do want to minimize as much as possible, especially in the context of doing closed-loop BMI, so being able to record and also stimulate and put information back into the brain. So in order to make sure that that latency between the end-to-end system is minimized, we need to have all of that computation locally. So that's one instance of the evidence of spike detection that you saw that's slowly progressed from computation from the computer onto the integrated chip is something that we strive to do as well with closed-loop BMI algorithms.
Yeah, I mean, essentially the vast amount of the computation is actually done locally on an ASIC, effectively. The amount of data that needs to be communicated beyond the body or the brain is really distilled down to a small amount. And as DJ was saying, like especially important for if you want to say give someone who's a tetraplegic the ability to type at 40 words a minute, which is one of our goals, and that requires a very low latency feedback loop.
I think last question.
Okay, last question. Okay, go. Yeah, fire away.
In terms of the vision of the company, are you trying to get to the stage where you can have one thread per neuron? And if not, what kind of number are you aiming at? And at what order of magnitude of channels would you consider trying it yourself?
Okay, this is a few questions packed in there. One of the first question was, essentially to summarize what we're saying is like, what's the ratio of electrodes to neurons? Because you wouldn't want a 1-to-1 ratio because that's a lot of electrodes. So you really want to actually have that ratio be as big as possible, and ideally at least 100-to-1, maybe 1,000-to-1, ideally. Because the bigger the ratio of neurons to electrodes, the fewer implantations, it's going to be just way better. For sure, you'd want to read a whole bunch of neurons and then be able to stimulate neurons or a cluster of neurons by varying the field potential, so that you don't need to have a 1-to-1 stim or read ratio. Ideally, 100-to-1. You guys want to add?
Yeah. I guess I would
or more. Yeah.
I think it's important to add to that any answer we give to what's the right number of electrodes at this point is speculation.
Yeah.
That's part of the. I mean,
speculate.
But the point I'm trying to make though is that this bootstrapping that we anticipate is going to happen. We're going to put in devices, they're going to be lower level. From that, we'll be able to find out the information content and information density in the areas that we're looking at with the electrodes we have. and we'll be able to bootstrap up from that. So, I actually believe that we are the ones that are going to be able to answer that question without speculation.
And I'll say, when you look at the anatomy of the brain is mostly silent. On average, a classic electrode can see somewhere between 0 and 4 neurons electrically by different waveform templates. But when you just look at the anatomy and the distances, you'd expect it to see more like 1,000. And so this question of why is the brain so silent is an interesting one. And one of the hypotheses is that there are a lot of neurons that have very narrow receptive fields that only fire when they have very high information content updates with respect to something specific. And one of the challenges with spike sorting is that you can't tell, you can't tell apart another spike of a neuron that you think you're recording from with, that was the first time I heard from that neuron specifically that I don't know is there, right? And as you have these long-lasting chronic devices, you'll be able to get more of that out in the decoding.
Yeah, I think it's going to vary. The electrode to neuron density is going to vary quite a bit depending upon what part of the brain it is as well. If it's sort of somatosensory is probably a pretty big ratio. You can get pretty impressive results controlling essentially a cursor with your brain. You don't need very many electrodes for that. So, and there's a lot of neurons in the sort of motor cortex. So I think there's some cases where you could have, I don't know, this is really speculation, of course. Some places where you could have maybe 10,000 to 1, and some places where you'd want maybe 10 to 1. It could probably, I suspect it will vary quite a bit.
And I just really quickly, I think Dan's question, because longevity is a really important question that we think about all the time. I don't think that we're releasing histology in the paper today, but I think that just to put some pressure on this team, I think that we're running that around SFN probably. There's some really cool stuff in progress.
All right, thanks everyone for coming. Thank you. Great questions. Great questions. Thank you.
We just witnessed history being made, and I believe that we will truly understand the impact of what just happened and what we witnessed and what we heard and what we watched in the coming years and in the coming decades. This is a huge opportunity for humanity and perhaps a huge obstacle also for a lot of people who would rather keep things as they've always been. A few things I just want to mention for those of you who are interested. Expect unbelievable amount of mockery, denial, rejection, and any negative things that can be thrown at the technology and people who promote and embrace and adapt to it. But also remember that every step throughout our history, any kind of social change, any kind of technological development, any kind of technological innovation was faced with the exact same thing. At first, people deny it, mock it, and make fun of it and say that it will never work. And then they say that it contradicts, I don't know, God, religion, Bible, Superman, whatever that you can come up with. Anything basically that you can throw in order to justify that your position is the correct one and the new position, the developing position, is false, and it will cause a lot of suffering and problem. And when all of these developments end up being completely determined and justified by social adoption and mass adoption, then everybody will say that, well, of course it will work because it's been around forever. So don't be discouraged if you're interested in this technology, if you're interested in this enhancement and in this augmentation. But at the same time, realize that any kind of technology is a tool that is available to us as humans to determine what we want to do with it. With fire, for example, we can warm ourselves up, we can warm our houses. At the same time, we can burn down the entire city and destroy our houses with it as well. It's a matter of human intention, how we want to use and how we will use any of these tools. So that's very important to realize. You will come across people, as you might have experienced within this chat window as well while we were watching this presentation, that some people would present to you that they definitely know what's going to happen, or they definitely know what's not going to happen. I just want to remind you of a quote by Stephen Hawking, who said, "The biggest enemy of knowledge is not the lack of knowledge, but the illusion of it." Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future. Nobody knows, especially in this day and age, considering the amount of information and the amount of possibilities that are available to every single human being who have access to internet, every single human being who have access to some kind of a technological tool that can create, receive, create, and share information. So we don't know what's going to happen. And if you listen to the final part of this presentation, a lot of the folks from Neuralink, they were also saying, this is a speculation, we don't know the exact answer. You're taking one step at a time. And that's the most important thing to realize, to stay humble rather than having any kind of a delusion that you already know what's going to happen. Tom Burton, have a great night. Thank you so much for being with us. So keep that in mind. Don't be discouraged. And I think it's also important, as I mentioned earlier before this presentation, that the most important thing that we should think about is decentralization of information, because this device that we can use for augmentation, for enhancement of our biological experience, I believe it's inevitable that we will have to augment alongside with technological evolution and artificial intelligence. And it's very important to realize that this hardware is empowered by software that is information and data driven, and it's incredibly important for us to consider decentralization as the way forward, so we won't rely on any specific or any general centralized structure of authority, whether it's Neuralink or Google or US government or US military or the Chinese state. So just keep that in mind, and don't be discouraged by the mockery of the people. Remember, as I said, every step of a way, when there is a social change, majority of the population are not happy with the change. They want things and the world to stay exactly as it is, and narrower they can make the world, happier they will become, because they feel that they're in control. So something to look forward to definitely for me. And I think this is also worth mentioning, that I am not going to, even though I'm looking forward to adapt this kind of augmentation to improve and enhance my biological experience, but I'm not going to try it until at least the third generation, just so the technology and the product can go through all the flaws and all the trial and error. BIGT, thank you so much for being with us. I really appreciate it. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Have a good night sleeping. And all of you, I appreciate you being here. This was awesome. I'm glad that we watched this together. And to end this segment, I just want to, because as I said, this device and all the future technological tools are empowered by the mind and the brain that will enable them to have this augmented kind of experiences. So keep in mind that decentralization is the way going forward. I want to end this presentation, this experience, this live stream with the final part of the presentation by Dr. Ben Gortzel, talking about the importance of decentralized artificial intelligence. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I see you guys around again during other live streams that I do. I create contents on a daily basis with the exception of the weekends. And on Fridays, I have Meal and Chill at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the same channel, so you guys are more than welcome to come. I'm going to play Ben Gortzel talking about decentralized artificial intelligence. Bir Kaif, have a good night. Thank you so much for being with us. The future looks wonderful. This is the best time to be alive. Do not be discouraged by naysayers and the apocalyptic kind of people who know, oh, we know what's going to happen. Jesus is going to come and set all of you on fire. God is getting really angry if you use internet. Every step of the way of human civilization, people have tried to stop human progress on an individual basis. Do whatever you want to do. And you should have the freedom to do whatever you want to do. That's why I believe transhumanism will become a civil right issue in the sense of individual freedom for body modification and body enhancement. It's none of anybody's business for as long as you're not trying to force other people to follow your belief and perspective, and you don't expect other people to finance and pay for your lifestyle and your choices. So stay focused, stay positive, and enjoy this wonderful life that we are experiencing and the beautiful future that we can all build together. I'm going to play Ben Goertzel, and then I'm going to wrap up this live stream. Have a great night, and I hope to see you guys again at some point on this channel and the live stream.
But I think it should be a higher percentage of the work going into AI for doing things of benefit to humanity rather than, to preserve the power status of a particular nation or maximize the shareholder value of a particular corporation. And toward that end, in 2017, I founded a project called SingularityNet, which is a blockchain-based, decentralized platform for artificial intelligence. So it's a dApp store, like a decentralized AI marketplace, where anyone can put an AI into the internet and have it announce it's there to the rest of the decentralized network. Then a company that needs AI services can put a request into this decentralized AI network, and anyone who can fulfill that request, any AI that can fulfill that request will make an offer. So as well as a decentralized marketplace for AIs, it's designed so the AIs in the marketplace can outsource work to each other and cooperate with each other and share data with each other. But the interesting thing about this is it's architected more like Bitcoin or Ethereum or BitTorrent. It's decentralized, it's peer-to-peer, nobody owns the thing. It's a decentralized protocol for AIs to provide services and to cooperate with each other and join forces with each other to solve problems. And then our project, SingularityNet, was really the first major project to build a sort of blockchain-based platform for AI. But now there's dozens of other blockchain-based AI platforms and networks. So we have an industry organization, the Decentralized AI Alliance, which is like a network of all the decentralized AI networks. But of course, that's what the human body is. It's a network of networks of networks. That's what society is a network of networks of networks. So the hope is that by advancing AI in this decentralized way and bringing together people and AIs that are working for the common good, we can cause the global brain of AIs networking together to self-organize in a more positive direction. And it's a significant challenge, right? Because you're trying to nudge the weight of AI development away from huge governments and corporations. But on the other hand, you look at BitTorrent, you look at Linux, you look at the internet itself, and there are many cases when this sort of decentralized peer-to-peer community way of organizing things has in fact prevailed and become pervasive. And it's important that we can do this with artificial intelligence, because arguably this is even more important than these other things. This may be the next species of intelligence on the planet. So yeah, you can take a look online for further information on these things. There's the Dia.Foundation, SingularityNet.io, opencog.org, or just Google my name. You'll find a lot of information. But for anyone who is working in the AI field or in another field that can use AI, which means almost everyone, I think this is an extremely important thing to be thinking about. Not only are we on the cusp of creating a form of intelligence going beyond ourselves, but what kind of intelligence it is may depend on what the early stage AIs we're building now are actually doing and how they're organizing themselves. And we should make that as beneficial as we can. Thank you.